Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about something that is really important to me and has really changed my life, and that is Jenkum.
There's a new way for your kids to get high. They're using raw sewage.
I couldn't imagine doing something like that. Sounds pretty sick to me.
Honestly, they need to find something better to do with their life. Seriously.
Something new, something stimulating, something different.
There's a lot of people that say it's a hoax or it's not real or it's just made up or whatever. Now let's just get this out of the way first, so you can laugh it all off or whatever, You won't be laughing once you experience what I have and have your life change. But, it's human waste. It's, shit.
It is shit, Basil. Oh, good. So it's not just me. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Jenkum podcast live. I'm your host, Josh Denny. And as always, trying to make your Monday a little less shittier than usual. Really excited for this episode. We've been waiting to do this for a while. A couple quick house cleaning things before we get started here with our guest. I apologize to anybody who was trying to come out and see me at the Dick Show on Saturday. Unfortunately, sometimes, and especially in Los Angeles, we have these places that still have archaic vaccine mandates. Of course I have a fly. Archaic vaccine mandates, and they're still checking vaccine passports in some places. We didn't know this was going to be the case until the day of with the venue, so had to cancel out there. But it sounds like it was still a great show and everybody had a fun time, and I'm sure in the future we'll do something together, myself and the guys from the Dick Show. I do have a show coming up in Los Angeles, March 14th, working out some new material right here in my hometown, Toluca Lake, Los Angeles, California. So come on out. There's tickets available to that show. And then working on some dates for New York and Florida coming up very soon. So hopefully probably now looking like the middle to the end of April for New York, as well as maybe Orlando area in May. So stay tuned, joshdenny.com for, it's not joshdenny.com. Don't go there. It's an insurance website, joshdennycomedy.com for dates and any updates on touring and stuff. Hoping to get some pretty big shows going this summer. Maybe we'll even try to get my buddy Gavin McGinnis out of his shell to come out and do some shows with us as well. So without further ado, very excited for this guest. I met this guest about a year ago now at an event here in Los Angeles, and I feel like we hit it off pretty well. And he's had an eventful last year or two, to say the least. Really an eventful last 5 years. Can't wait for you guys to be able to listen into this conversation. Give it up for Brandon Straka, ladies and gentlemen. Hey.
Hey, Josh.
How you doing, man?
I'm pretty good. Did you say the Dick Show?
Yeah, the Dick Show.
What is the Dick Show?
It's a podcast. Dick Masterson does a podcast.
Okay.
Out of Los Angeles here. Very funny guy. Been around for a long, long time. And we were supposed to do a live event on Saturday, and lo and behold, like often happens nowadays, they had vaccine mandates. And of course, it's funny because anytime you get these sort of like cult podcasts, as soon as I tweeted that I wouldn't be there, like fans of his tweeted me and were like, dude, I'll get you a fake card. Just by all means, like delete this tweet. We'll get you a fake card and you can come out. But I mean, I don't know about you. I'm just of the mindset of like, I wouldn't show a fake vaccine card to go into a place where we're entertaining and bringing business to the business. And it's like, I always liken it to this. It's like, yeah, it would be like if I was coming up during the civil rights movement and people were like, hey, do you want to go to this restaurant? They have the best pizza. It's whites only. So I know you're not cool with that, but it is the best pizza. And you're just like, well, sorry, blacks. I guess, I don't want to miss out.
Well, I can tell you that I would never break the law. So providing a fake vaccine passport would, of course, be breaking federal law. And that's something
Correct.
that I would never, ever do.
Or no one on this show would suggest that anyone does.
No.
Get legal disclaimers out of the way. So, Brandon, you've had quite a couple years. For anybody who's listening to this who's not familiar with you and WALKAWAY, which I think you'd have to be living under a fucking rock to not know about
Dummy.
you and the walkaway movement. But I mean, kind of bring the viewers up to speed a little bit. How did Walkaway start, or where were you when it began, and kind of take us through some of those early days?
Sure. So Walkaway is basically a movement that I created in 2018, which encourages people on the left to walk away from the Democratic Party, and along with it, the ideology of liberalism and the liberal media and all these leftist lies and myths and propaganda. And the reason why I decided to create the movement is because that was exactly the experience that I had in 2016 is when it started. God, it's getting hard to even remember now.
I know.
It's kind of a while ago. Wait, is that even right? Yeah.
Can you even believe that that's now what, 7 years ago we're going on?
That's why I feel like it doesn't make sense. That's 2016 was Trump versus Hillary, right?
Yeah.
God,
yeah. 6 years ago.
Wow.
It's wild.
That's crazy. Yeah. Okay. So Trump got elected, and that ended up being obviously this huge upset. And I was, a lifelong devotee to the Democratic Party, largely because I'm gay. And as you are well aware, and I think many are well aware, there's kind of a stranglehold that the Democrats have on various minority communities. They've got their various little marketing ploys, but it's basically just the same strategies and techniques.
Well, and I think that's kind of related to the long-standing relationship that the right has always had with religion and the church, right? And so there was always sort of this preconceived idea that I had as a young liberal or, libertarian that if you're pro-gay rights, if you're pro-gay marriage, that's probably not aligned with conservatism, and generally because we've always kind of grown up with this idea that Republicans are, very religious, strict conservatives who are anti-gay marriage, and sort of like a throw you to the wolves kind of party. So was there something specifically after Trump got elected that made you start to sort of look around and go like, maybe this isn't what I've been told, or maybe this isn't what I was led to believe?
Well, yeah, I mean, but it was everything. I mean, it started with, I think, the reaction to his election. I mean, and it was immediate. Like, I still remember, I remember election day 2016. I was having friends over to watch Hillary become the first woman president, and then the oxygen was getting sucked out of the room with every passing minute as he's just attaining more and more and more electoral votes. And then my friends left, and I went to bed around midnight, and they still hadn't called the election. This was on the East Coast in New York, and I couldn't sleep, so I kept every 5 minutes I kept refreshing the Huffington Post because that was what I read. That was my news. And then finally at 2:15 in the morning, the headline changed, and they had a picture of Trump with a giant red banner that said "Nightmare President Trump," and then it said, millions to lose their health insurance, civil rights to be rolled back, ... and other possible headlines from a Trump presidency. So they were beginning to predict the future of what would be the headlines of a Trump presidency. And I was really scared. I was legit. It was working. I was buying into everything that they were saying. And so then that kind of set me on this journey of research to try to understand, how did the media get it so wrong, and why would anyone vote for him? And so I just did a lot of reading and researching it. But the one moment that really pushed it over for me was in January of 2017. So a few months after he got elected, and right around the time he was about to take office, I had gotten on Facebook and I said something like, I'll never be able to understand how anyone could vote for a man who's capable of mocking a reporter's disability before a cheering crowd. And then that was when somebody reached out to me privately and sent me a link to, it was a YouTube video that was called something like "Debunking that Trump Mocked the Disabled Reporter." And it showed that compilation of footage, I don't know if you've ever seen it, of Donald Trump doing that same voice and gesture numerous times as he did that day at his rally when he was accused of, do you remember when he was accused of making fun?
Yeah, I don't know, that whole scene. Yeah.
Yeah, he was going like that. And so CNN
as a comedian, by the way, hilarious, right? I'm looking at that going, I said, as a comedian, I saw that and I thought it was hilarious. And
well, yeah. And CNN like freeze framed it when he was like this. And then they pulled up a picture of this reporter that he was like making fun of. And that reporter does have an arm that's like that. And so it did seem like that's what he was doing. But then, somebody put this compilation video together where they showed that he's done this, a half a dozen times or more. Well, I'm sure many more times that throughout the years when he's making fun of anybody who's flustered because they're caught in a lie. Like that's what when he's doing his bit about somebody who's gotten caught and they're backtracking. He's like, and so then I started to realize, oh my God, the media that I trust is capable of making me believe some really nasty things. And
that aren't 100% based in reality. Yeah. And you saw this happen throughout his presidency. Like I remember the big one for me, and granted, as a sports fan, as a comedian, like I loved election night I was a Gary Johnson voter, for the record, by the way, but I loved election night just from the perspective of everyone was so smug that they had it in the bag. And I remember we were filming my Food Network show when the debates were happening, when it was finally down to Hillary and Trump and they were debating each other. And there was that one debate I'll never forget. We had just gotten into town in Nashville to film a leg of episodes. We were sitting in the lobby of the Holiday Inn and my whole crew was downstairs watching the debate. And there was that moment in the debate where Hillary looked into the camera and she goes, I can't spend time on that. I've been busy preparing to be president of the United States. And the whole audience cheered. And I remember looking at the clerk at the desk, young black kid, and he was looking at her with such disgust. And I remember thinking to myself, she just lost this election. I think she just lost this election. I told my crew that, and they were like, no, sort of like you said, there's no way, right? There's absolutely no way. And these are all show business people, but they were like, there's no way that he's winning this election. And then Michael Moore came out maybe a few weeks later and said, like, listen, I just went to a rally in Michigan, and whether you like his rhetoric or not, he's resonating with people and he's talking about things that they actually care about. And I think you're going to be surprised on election day. And he was right. And then
he said he was going to win.
Yeah, he goes, he's going to win. And and I didn't have like this tremendous fear of a Trump presidency because I thought he would do kind of what he did, which is get into office, pass some legislation, do a lot of press, and play a lot of golf, right? And kind of like a Bob Hope presidency, if you will. Right. And really like kind of be more of a pageanty kind of president, less effective. They've kind of all been like that, I think, since the 80s. But I remember when I started seeing the media stuff that you talk about, and the big one for me was Charlottesville when I watched the live thing where he, condemned white supremacy at the top of the whole thing. And then when the media started running those stories without that piece and just showing a piece that sort of painted a completely different narrative, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh no, they're not interested in telling the truth at all. This is a hit job. And then it almost makes you kind of like root for the guy. And that's when I really started following it more often, because I was like, wow, the editing job that they're doing on this and the stuff that they're excluding or including or they're deliberately taking stuff out of context to create this narrative. And what was, I think, the most concerning about it was I was looking at sort of boots on the ground in Los Angeles and seeing the effect it had on people, like you talked about. Like they were terrified. They thought it was all real. And I'm going, didn't you see the full clip? Like you guys are freaking out. Like Hitler's about to, storm into our city. And it's not that at all. They're just painting this lie.
Yeah, totally. That's you said exactly what I was about to say, is that I think the scariest part is seeing how effective it is. Yeah. And it's not just that people are scared. I mean, if people were only scared, that you can kind of work with, you can kind of manage that a little bit, but that fear quickly turns to outrage and almost just like an unrestrained mob mentality. And that's, I think, what we see so often with the left. I mean, you can't even reason with people. And when you try to reason with people, it's this weird place that people go in their minds. I get it because I've been there myself. And once you leave it, just, like leaving the left, like once you walk away from the left, then it's like you kind of shut off that part of your brain that's able to just engage in that cognitive dissonance and just go straight to that anger. But it's, there are times I'm having arguments with people on the left, and it's weird because it's like they should have everything that they need. 1, I voted for Obama twice. 2, I voted for Hillary Clinton. 3, I've been a Democrat my entire life up until a few years ago. 4, I'm a gay man. I'm still like an advocate for gay rights. 5, my organization does these events for minority communities all the time. Obviously, I support minority communities, but when you start having an argument with these people, like they quickly go to this place where they're just like, you're literally supporting someone who supports Nazis, and then they're just like, what's wrong with you? You need to educate yourself. You need to educate. And you're like, but I am I'm the one who's actually watched the whole video in its context. And then you try to get them to watch the video and they're like, why would I watch a video of a Nazi? And you're like, but the thing you're mad about isn't real. Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it reminds me of a thing I shared today. I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. Probably not. It's not that big of a deal. But there was a story came out about Zoe Kravitz auditioning for Batman. Or, the Batman came out this weekend. She plays Catwoman in it. And there was a story that came out. I think it was Elite Daily published it. And they said, she auditioned for the 2012 Dark Knight Rises to play Catwoman in that, or wanted to audition, and they told her she was too urban. And then so you go into the comments and it's like a million people talking, Christopher Nolan is racist. He didn't want a black Catwoman. And then you go read the actual article and she says, it wasn't Christopher Nolan directly. It was quite possibly just the casting director and assistant casting director. And I go, read those words. Zoe Kravitz in the interview says quite possibly, meaning it wasn't directly even said to her by a casting agent or an assistant casting director or an ACD. So she's getting this information secondhand from her team, who are just going, yeah, they're not interested in you. You would be too urban a casting. We don't even know that the casting director or ACD even said that to the person. Her agent might have just said, you're too urban, right? And I've had agents and managers tell me shit that's not real, that never happened, because they don't want to submit me for a thing. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well. And then I was like, take a look at that timing. Like, first of all, she had just done an X-Men film, so she probably had a clause in the contract that said you can't do other superhero flicks because you're signed up with Fox on this holding deal for X-Men. And likely, if they were going to do sequels, she was probably under a non-compete to do that in the first place. And then secondly, the timing of that, like, she had done that little X-Men film that bombed, by the way. And then she had done some indies and stuff before that. But like, the people they auditioned for that Dark Knight Rises role was like Natalie Portman, who had just won an Oscar for Black Swan, Anne Hathaway, Blake Lively, who had just done something really big, I think, before that. And so like you had, she had done, I think, The Town, that Ben Affleck heist movie, which was really, really big. So it's like you have all these A-listers, and she's the kid of two celebrities going, well, if I don't get it, it must be racism, And so it's so interesting to me how much people can just not even read and just draw conclusions and then create a whole movement now online of people going, we need to cancel Chris Nolan because he didn't want a black Catwoman. It's like, none of that's based in reality.
Right. And also you said somewhere in there too that she had made a movie around that time that had tanked. I mean, it's such a great out for people to have that like built-in excuse when maybe they're not at a high point in their career too. I mean, yes. Maybe they looked at her and they're just like, look, she's not pulling people into the box office right now. This is not a good casting decision. She just totally flopped in this movie. And then she gets to be like, racism. And it's like, no, there are a lot of black actors who are killing it right now. You just happen to not be one of them. Well, and I don't want you anywhere near my movie.
And to accuse like Christopher Nolan of being racist, it's like his Batman is the only one to include the Lucius Fox character, which was played by Morgan Freeman in those films, who was the only black character in the Batman comic book universe ever. And he made it a point to make him like basically the co-star of those films alongside. He was bigger than Alfred in a couple of the movies. So it's just like, And by the way, if you go back and read like Screen Rant and industry trade stuff, she has interviewed and said that they auditioned her to play the friend of Catwoman, or maybe her roommate or whatever. That role ended up going to Juno Temple. But it's like, if you were too urban for the picture, they wouldn't have seen you at all. So it sounds like you weren't considered to be A-list enough to co-star Christian Bale in a proven franchise. By the way, you're 15 years his junior, and you look very young for your age. So could you imagine flipping the script? And if she had been cast, then we would have had all these. Is it really appropriate for a 23-year-old actress to be romantically paired up with a 40-year-old Christian Bale? And, so there's so many other ways that could have been twisted had it gone the way she wanted.
Well, and can't you also just be grateful that you get to be in movies at all just because your dad's Lenny Kravitz?
Right. And your mom's Lisa Bonet.
I mean, that's it, period. Like, none of this would be happening for you. You wouldn't even have the luxury problems of bitching about which A-list movie you get to be in and which one you don't just because your dad's Lenny Kravitz.
Yeah. I mean, and I've never seen, listen, I'm sure she's fine, but I've never seen a performance out of her where I've been like fucking blown away, right? Like,
well, I'm Googling her right now. I don't even remember what she looks like.
You watch Zendaya in Euphoria and you watch the acting that she puts into that show and you go, that girl is not just a bona fide star, but she's a genuine grade A talent.
Well, she's very beautiful.
Yeah, but she's a tremendous actress as well. And
I'm talking about Zoe Kravitz. Sorry, I'm Googling her.
Yeah. No, I was talking about Zendaya, but yeah. So it's just like, I hate when people sort of they'll throw all these other excuses up, like you said, where they're just like, yeah, I didn't get it because I was black at the time, and it's like that couldn't be further from the truth. You didn't get it because you weren't that good. You weren't that famous. You were mostly famous for who your parents were, and you just had a film tank.
Right. Well, and there's a million reasons why anybody, like I've had back when I was auditioning as an actor, really long time ago. No, but I mean, like there were so many auditions where I walked away and I was like, I just crushed it. Like that was like no one possibly did a better audition than that. But then you don't they may have already cast the female lead and she's taller than you or she's whatever, and it's out of your hands. There's a million different reasons, but that's, listen, I don't know if we get a little controversial on this show, but
as much as you want.
Well, I always say that, they talk about white privilege. To me, I reiterate that I think that the greatest privilege about being white is that no one ever teaches white people when we're growing up that our failures are someone else's fault. I mean, anytime I've ever failed in my life, which has been numerous times, either that I failed or I've not failed and I haven't gotten what I wanted. The only lesson I was ever taught in life was that I need to work harder and try harder next time, because obviously something didn't work out this time. And the only way to try to ensure that it works out next time is to do better, work harder, be better, try harder. No one ever said, you are perfect, you did nothing wrong, but the color of your skin has closed the door, and that's why. And so, I mean, I just always grew up being told that I needed to work harder and try harder. And
I've told this story on the show a few times, but I specifically was told one time I didn't get a gig because I was white. It was for Def Jam's final season. And I auditioned. I was the only white comic on the audition lineup. It was like 17 comedians. I went up dead last. They gave me 5 minutes and I crushed it. And Bob Sumner, the longtime producer of Def Jam, came up to me at the end and goes, "You are great. You're one of the best comics we've seen this year. We're just not putting any white comedians on the final season of Def Jam. It's a black, it's a legacy black show. There's no way." And he was like, "We've only had 2 white comics or 1 white comic the entire time. And it was Rich Voss." And so it was like, I was like, I get it. I get that that's an institution. And that, from a business perspective, there's probably people that have been waiting 20 years in their career to get that shot. I understand that I might have been the best that night. That doesn't mean I'm the best in the country. That doesn't mean I'm the most deserving of every comedian that's auditioned. And it doesn't mean that other people have waited longer or paid more dues. So I was just like, all right, man, I'll get them next time. So, exactly. But I didn't take to the internet and go, I didn't get Def Jam because I'm white and they're racist.
But you kind of could have.
I could have, yeah.
I mean, it would have been true.
And I would have been mocked
or racially biased.
Yeah, the same way I was mocked in 2018 when I said we've turned the phrase straight white male into the new N-word. And it's like, look at the amount of open, rampant racism you're allowed to display towards white people today. And it's not only is it allowed, but it's like applauded. If you could say something in a professional setting that if you or I said it about another race of people, we'd be fired instantaneously on the spot. And if you're a person of color and you say it about white people, it's not only going to slide, people are probably going to clap for you.
Right.
That is a disgusting detour in the road of progressiveness that I think we all thought we were trying to get to.
Right. Well, and so I was actually going to say too, when you were talking about not getting a job for being white, like it's acceptable to openly say that. Like I was one of the last auditions I ever did before I started WALKAWAY, because I've had a very weird life, and like I used to be an actor, and then I wasn't an actor for a long time because I got really into drugs and alcohol, and then I got sober. And then when I got sober, I was like, I'm going to be an actor again. So I started auditioning, and then like months after that, I started WALKAWAY, and then I was like, shit, now I can't be an actor because like who's going to hire this like Republican gay guy to do anything? But anyway,
yeah, that's a lot of times like our mutual friend Karen from American Freedom Alliance. She was like, she's like, you're a sharp guy. You got interesting ideas. Like you should run for something. I go, yeah, but my career is over the day I decide I'm going to run for office of anything. So
totally,
maybe when I'm 50, but not anytime soon. I still got some stuff I want to do before those days come along.
Well, one of the last auditions I went on, a casting guy came in the room, and maybe it wasn't an audition. Maybe it was one of those like open call, like when you're auditioning for an agent. I think that's what it was.
Oh, okay,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, and
like a showcase.
Thank you, God. Yeah. See, I'm really so. But one of the guys came in the room, and he just openly said to everybody in the room, and there were like, I don't know, 30, 35 of us sitting there, all different backgrounds, different types. And he was like, yeah, he was like, we're not even like looking for white people anymore. He was just like, all of our commercials and everything that we're it's just, people of color, and they want to see a lot of diversity. And he was like, so we just don't even bother taking on any new white clients. And I'm like, and you just said that just right out loud.
And I can't do anything about that. That's what sucks. It's like, and by the way, when people go, oh, why did you share that thought on Twitter, the straight white male tweet? That was my first real big sort of cancellation moment. But I had just gotten done trying to pitch a stand-up special, and the production company was like, yeah, we're not making any white guy stand-up specials this year. And I was like, what the fuck do I do with that then? You know what I mean? Like, and so I had that. And then the thing that prompted that was the Sutherland Springs shooting happened that day. And it was a good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun. But before the facts were out, it was white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy. The problem isn't guns. The problem is straight white men. And so I was essentially just commenting on the news cycle that day of saying, boy, we've really started using that word, like the N word. Right. And it reminded me of like growing up in the 80s and 90s in Philadelphia. Anytime there was a problem in the city, I grew up in a very Irish and Italian neighborhood. It was literally just constantly people on the show being like, it's because of these fucking blacks or these Koreans or fucking Vietnamese just taking over Center City. And it's like, that I was like, that is the same shit now that we're doing with white people. It's not exactly progressive. The same. You can tell me it makes you feel good. I'll accept that, but don't tell me that it's justice or it's right or it's fair.
No, and they've really weaponized that word too. There was a gay person with a blue check mark next to his name who I guess he writes for the Huffington Post and a bunch of bullshit. But he and I were going back and forth the other day, and he sent me a link to an article he had written, and he's white, by the way. And like just the way that they weaponize, and God, it drives me crazy because these are the people, they always feel like they're hearing dog whistles from our side of the aisle. They're always talking about like Trump's dog whistles and Republican dog whistles, and the dog whistles are always things like, economy and America.
Oh my
first.
God, the OK symbol. I mean, that thing is so ridiculous.
But in this article, this guy was whatever he was writing about, he was citing an example or what he considered to be an example of what he was talking about with the justice issue he was upset about. And he started describing this woman in this circumstance. And he said something, like Amy, who is a white woman with blonde hair. And I was like, that's a completely extraneous thing that you did, but you only put that in there because you knew that your audience would hate her more because you said that. And why are you unable to connect in your brain? Like, you wrote that because it'll make your audience hate. So if you know your audience hates based off of hearing white skin color and blonde hair, like, don't you see what you are? Like,
yeah.
It's unbelievable.
That's literally like being in the Jim Crow South and like hearing a white dude scream at a black guy as he runs down the street, like, get him. You know what I mean? Like, that's the same kind of shit. So,
and they're the people that love to, like, when they do their kind of caricature of what a conservative is, they'll always be like, oh, it's a bunch of white guys sitting around going, the Mexicans are taking our jobs, or the illegals and stuff. And it's like, dude, that's what you are. I mean, you're the person who reads white woman, and it's like, you're like, where's a white woman? Where? Get her.
Well, and also this idea that race either limits or permits your life experience is so reductive. Like I've experienced a lot of stuff that you wouldn't assume based on looking at me because of the people I've dated in my life or who I've lived with or the jobs I've had, just all different kinds of things. I've interacted with people. And what I think is amazing is this idea that there is not this utter open hatred towards white people. The only way you would ever believe that's not true is if you only ever surrounded yourself with white people. Because if you surround yourself with any other group of people and you hear the way they talk about you, it's pretty open and they're pretty unapologetic about it. And so, it's like, part of the reason I have a perspective that would make me say that is because I'm around enough black people and enough Mexican people in Los Angeles and see them and hang out to where I experience it firsthand and I see it. And I see how Hollywood kind of chimes in on that thing as well. And so, it's a problem and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. But before we make this sort of like a showbiz cast, I don't want to get too far away from where you were in the story of, you're seeing the Trump lies happen. Where does WALKAWAY begin? Because I remember the first thing I saw of you was your video, your WALKAWAY video that went viral. That was sort of like a very vulnerable, open confession. And then the movement was kind of really off on its way at that point.
Yes. So throughout 2017, that's when I kind of went on my journey of research, and there was like an arc that went through the whole year. So it began with by early to mid 2017, I knew I could no longer be a Democrat, and I knew that I was done with the liberal media and the whole ideology of liberalism and things like that. And that was a lot. Because of things like what you and I are talking about right now. Like, even as I was a liberal and as I was like an out loud and proud Democrat, there were years that I was feeling really like unnerved and annoyed by where we were headed with conversations about race and what things that I saw the LGBT community doing, where I saw like that was clearly headed. And then I started to put two and two together when I started researching, because I was like, oh, this is very political. Like, this is a manipulation of the left. I really didn't get it. I mean, I'm sure like that makes me an idiot, but I didn't get that conservatives were not buying into this. And so then I started to like conservatives more. And then I started to actually like research conservatism and listen to their points of view and their argument. And by the end of 2017, I was like, I actually am a conservative. Like, that's how I identify now. So in 2018,
was there somebody individual that jumped out to you that was like, that was sort of like the lightning rod for, wow, maybe my views are more conservative? Was there like one person?
No, I started listening to everybody, and a lot of people I was like super turned off by in the past and wouldn't even listen to them. Like one by one, I started listening to them, and like I used to hate Ann Coulter, and I used to hate Tucker Carlson, and I hated Milo, and I probably hated Ben Shapiro, but I don't really totally remember. But I think I'm sure I hated everybody. So, but like those were some, like one by one, I started listening to people like Tucker, especially had a profound impact on me because he's just so brilliant, and I love the way he debates and the way that he like articulates his opinions and deconstructs like the debate point of view. I just think he's amazing, and even like people like Ann Coulter, who I think are really caustic and kind of intentionally nasty. Like I started to kind of just listen to the truth behind the persona, and the truth was actually mostly pretty good for the most part. Yeah,
I felt the same way about her and Tommy Lauren, especially because she was going viral at the time. And I felt like you can definitely tell with Tommy, there's like a bit of sass that's kind of put on where she's almost like, she almost wants to be sort of like a Yosemite Sam, guns up in the air, like yay freedom kind of chick. But there was also a lot of substance behind the points she was making. And I remember the thing I admired about her and I started to notice about conservatives is they were unafraid to go on the road, so to speak, on enemy territory to debate their points. So she went on the Daily Show, and then I remember Milo went on Bill Maher, and so there were so many of these situations where conservatives were unafraid to go into enemy territory and debate their point of view or have conversations. Ben Shapiro was doing a lot of this, and that was around the time I got turned on to Gavin, and I started going like, why is that side so unafraid to defend their positions, but the left doesn't do that at all?
No. Every once in a while, they'll find a leftist who's willing to go on Tucker, and usually it does not end well at all for that person. But other than that, it's very difficult. Even with WALKAWAY, we've tried numerous times to have debates over the years, and they just simply will not do it. And there's a woman named, let me see if I can think of her name. It's something like she has 3 names. She's a black woman, like Nicole Hannah Smith or
it's not Yvette Nicole Brown, is it?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but I just realized I might have said Hannah Nicole Smith. No, I don't think that's her name. No. I
By the way, a black woman with 3 names and one of them is Nicole. I mean, Jesus Christ, we'll be here all day, Strzok.
Hold on. I'm going to see if I can find this woman real quick. Anyway, we were
Holly Robinson Pete. I mean, I think it's a rule. I think it's a rule when you get verified as a black woman on Twitter that you have to have 3 names.
I can't find her. Anyway.
Black women on Twitter and presidential assassinators. They all have to have 3 names.
But this woman goes on television constantly. She espouses very leftist black points of view. She's very a big fan of like critical race theory and Black Lives Matter and all of this stuff. And so we were doing a debate a year ago. We were going to have 3 panelists on the right. So it was supposed to be Black Americans right versus Black Americans left, live audience, live streamed, talk about the issues. Now, here's a couple of things I want you to know. Number 1, anytime anybody is willing to do a debate and go outside of their comfort zone and at an event that's hosted by somebody who's openly conservative, like I am going to go out of my way to make that person feel comfortable. Whatever you want in your dressing room, whatever snack you want, I'll hire someone to fan you. Like I am going to kiss that person's ass and treat them better than they've ever been treated in their entire life. So we reached out to her and a number of other people. I can't think of her name.
That's also just productive for healthy debate or conversation, because if somebody goes into what feels like hostile territory, they're going to respond in a very defensive, hostile way.
Right. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we went above and beyond to try to be super nice, super accommodating. And so we offered her a shitload of money. I mean, like a huge paycheck for huge. And then we offered, of course, to take care of all of her expenses, including first class travel, hotel, whatever. And we asked, what else do you need? And so we heard back from her like booking agent or assistant, and he said he wanted to jump on a Zoom with us. So we said, okay, great. And so we got on a Zoom with him, and he was, first of all, he was like super gay and probably, obviously super liberal. And so he hated me right out of the gate. But that's okay. We don't have to be friends. I just need to do whatever is necessary to book his talent. And so I was in there prepared to give them just about anything that they wanted. But he said to me right from the beginning, he was like, it's not that she's against doing debates, but he was like, he was like, I've kind of taken a look at, you guys and what you do and some of the people you're having. And he's like, I just don't see the point in this. Cause he was like, honestly, for a debate to be successful, it's really, I think, important for all the panelists to agree on about 98% of the material. And he was like, otherwise this is just going to turn in. And I said, well, wait, I was like, I don't think you understand the purpose of a debate at all. Right. I was like, if everybody agrees on almost everything, then that's not a debate. I understand that's like probably the left wing.
That's a circle jerk. And as much as I'm a fan of that as anybody else, that's not what we're booking here.
I mean, basically, I think that what he was saying was, if you're going to get 6 black people on a panel, the debate should be, are we super oppressed or are we super oppressed? But like, right. But like, God forbid there's a black person on the panel who's actually like, I don't feel oppressed at all. And I don't really want to talk about slavery because it's 2022 and I believe I can be anything I want to be in America. Yeah. Like, that's a debate that the left doesn't want to have.
Yeah, which I talked about at great length with Adam Coleman. And, being somebody, I wrote about this when I wrote an article about Kanye a week ago or so. But I was watching his documentary, and one of the things that kind of comes up all the time when you talk about race in America is the talk that black parents supposedly have to have with their kids about how hard their life is going to be. And I remember having very real conversations with black girlfriends of mine of like, we're never going to have the talk with our children, because I would never want to have a conversation with my child that sets limitations for them on what they're capable of achieving. You know what I mean? And I'll never forget one of my favorite holiday movies, not to diverge too much, is The Family Stone. I'll watch it every Christmas and it'll bring me to tears every Christmas. But there's a moment there where Sarah Jessica Parker is like ranting on about the gay couple adopting a child. And she's talking about, would they want a gay child or would they want the child to be black? And then she's like, but having 2 fathers, it's life is going to be hard enough already. And it's just like the assumptions that people make about how people view themselves is so insane to me, right? Like the idea that so many white people automatically assume that black people feel at a disadvantage or that gay people feel at a disadvantage. It's like, no, I don't think I'm lesser than. You think I'm lesser than. Yes. And that's why you're putting that on me. And I'm sure you had to experience that numerous times as a gay man coming up in Hollywood, where people were very quick to be offended for you. And you're just like, that doesn't bother me at all. But the fact that it bothers you tells me a lot about you.
Well, honestly, I feel like I experience that more now that I'm a conservative, because when I was in my liberal days, I probably enjoyed that vibe, that like, oh, this person feels sorry for me. And oh, it's like this way of kind of getting props for something that you didn't really do, because that's what's so nauseating are the people who are, whether it's like a black woman or like a gay guy or a trans whatever, and they're just like, I was somehow able to succeed even in spite of blah, 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 blah. And it's like,
great impression.
In 2022, it's like people are literally handing out jobs. It's just like, oh my God, you're trans. Please become the Secretary of Energy.
Right. Yeah. I have a friend who's a lawyer who's been interviewing for jobs. He said a firm just straight up asked him if he was gay. And he was like, fuck yeah, I'm gay. And I was like, dude, you're not gay. And he's like, yeah, but I'm passing. So I was like, more power to you, man. Maybe that's, and my girlfriend has joked about that with me all the time. She's like, listen, I've seen you play gay. You can fucking play gay. You might as well just be out there playing gay so that you get these jobs.
Yeah, but that gay card doesn't get you very far anymore.
Yeah, because white almost trumps gay now to the point where it cancels each other out.
Well, yeah, and even honestly, we're very close to even black and gay being meaningless if you're a man.
Yeah. If you're a man,
because and it's the trans activists who have done that, and it's always amazing to me that the gay community is like going along with this, like marching off to their own death, because from within it's this new, and it's not even actually transgender people. That's the thing. Like if it was actually transgender people, like fine, okay, I'd start waving the white flag, but it's not. It's just, like these awkward 13 and 14-year-old girls who are like, I'm a boy and a girl and both and neither, and I have purple hair and I have a nose ring, and oh, I'm so like, it's like just this awkward teenager identity thing, and suddenly that's become the new definition of trans. And gay men are an inconvenience to these people. Like I'm really surprised they haven't lopped that G right off the acronym and threw it into the river at this point, because they view gay men as so privileged at this point that we've actually become a burden to them. They really are. They're much more, and skin color is actually more like LGBT. You may have noticed they've added the brown and the black stripe to the flag, and skin color is actually much more important to them at this point than homosexuality if you're a man. Unless you're a black man, then they still hate you too.
It's very interesting to hear your perspective on that, because I think I've just found, and maybe it's just my circle of friends, that more of my gay friends echo your sentiments than kind of carry the flag the other way, and most of my gay male friends would sort of identify, maybe the way Chappelle did in that last special, as a TERF, in the sense of, well, we like the idea of promoting trans rights and trans equality, but not at the expense of women's rights. And so then you start to run into that, where we talk about the left eating itself. And it's like, when trans rights are impeding on women's rights so much that now transgender people are taking opportunities away from women in their own sports or in their own fields, and we'll probably see this academically very soon, that's not necessarily good progress, right? It's almost like if it's very much like a Rachel Dolazoling, where people are just identifying as something to to change the way competition works, and I don't think that's in the spirit of America.
Well, and it only works really one way. If you pay attention, like there's always so much fallacy and lack of logic in their arguments. Like, have you ever noticed that you never see biological females who transition to males doing men's powerlifting? Like, why is that never an issue? Like, why are trans people who are born women, who are biological females who transition to males, why are they not doing men's boxing and men's wrestling and men's powerlifting and men's squatting? And it's only biological men who transition to women who are doing women's sports.
Women aren't transitioning into men and going, let me fight 135-pound men in the UFC.
Right.
It's the other way around. And that's the other thing where it gets dangerous is, a lot of people don't even realize that, like, some of the one of the communities that's the most affected by domestic violence is the lesbian community. And now imagine what that looks like in the guise of, male to female transgender women in relationships with women. And now the way that domestic violence is handled based off of gender identity. And you really, at the end of the day, you have somebody with higher muscle mass, larger frame, more density, just beating the shit out of a little girl, and it's like, and I'm thinking of a specific friend of mine who's gone through that situation with, not a trans woman, but a woman who essentially identifies as male and is like twice her size. But because they're both women, the domestic violence thing is not treated with the same sort of, I guess, concern it would be, the seriousness that it would be if she was actually male. And so it's not just nobody really, I feel like, is looking down the line of seeing, like, how bad could this really get, worst case scenario, before we start to completely deconstruct the lines between man and woman.
Well, and also one of the, I think, nastiest manipulations of the trans community there's this whole power structure that a lot of people who probably aren't minorities, like don't know or understand, which is great. Good for you. I wish I didn't have to know it either. But it's what I call the oppression industry, which are groups like, on the black side, you've got like the NAACP. On the gay side, you've got the Human Rights Campaign or GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Anti-Defamation. Yeah. And so when we live in an age like we do today, we're in 2022, and I'm just going to say it, like homophobia is barely even ticking on the meter. You know, at this point in this country, it doesn't even hardly exist at all anywhere in any demonstrable way. But the people who have been paying themselves, $650,000 a year, the heads of these nonprofits like the Human Rights Campaign have to keep bringing money in and justifying these salaries. And the way that they do that is that they scare the hell out of people in minority communities and tell them, send money. Like, does this scare you? Write a check. And so one of the things that they do that they've really latched onto in the last few years is putting out these articles constantly about trans women of color being murdered. And they intentionally, they make it a point to talk about them being of color or black trans women. Sometimes they'll say black trans women. And the whole point is to make it seem like they're being killed by white men. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is, this isn't true at all. In fact, someone I know personally did all the research in 2019. He went back to 2018 and looked up every single case, because that year, I think the number was something like 36 trans women of color had been killed. I think I read this, and it was related to
sex work and drugs. Sex work, and drugs,
right. But I think even more relevant is that not a single one of these people were killed by a Caucasian male. Not one. Wow. Every single one of the trans women of color that were killed that year were either killed by a black or Hispanic man, and in nearly every case, the situation was either drug work or sex work. Now, do we know for sure if it had anything to do with them being trans or not? No, we don't know for sure. But we can certainly assume that it could have easily been a drug transaction gone wrong or a sex work transaction gone wrong. Now, did any of these people deserve to die? Of course not. It doesn't make their murder any less egregious. But
if we found out these were less than 0.5% of prostitutes across the country murdered in the same way, or sex workers, I should say, murdered in the same way, it would not be the story that it is, right? Right. Yeah. And if you did like a polling of the number of people who engage in drug trading or sex work and see how many people are murdered, you would probably find a pretty consistent rate of people, trans or not, who are killed, who work in that line of work. And so I'd say it makes up probably a pretty substantial percentage of murders are either drug related or sex work related.
But when you've got, these institutions, again, like the Human Rights Campaign or GLAAD or something, that are constantly putting out these articles being like, oh my God, trans women of color are being murdered at these astronomical rates and send money. I'm willing to say right now, I will pay $10,000 to the Human Rights Campaign if they will publish the identities of those murderers and publish any information surrounding the cause of death at the time of the day. If they will publish pictures of the murderers of these trans women of color, I will donate $10,000 to the Human Rights Campaign.
Well, that's tremendous. And the other thing that's interesting too is there was a young gay black man who was murdered during the Trump administration leading up to the last election cycle. And he was found dead in the apartment of like a very prominent white, filthy rich, like billionaire guy who was a major funder of these different campaigns, Newsom, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, etc. And that whole case was completely swept under the rug. And it was the second time that a young black sex worker was found dead around this dude, or maybe it was on one of his properties. And it's like, this is a recurring theme, like something out of that movie 8mm with Nicolas Cage and Joaquin Phoenix, where it's like, this is a billionaire guy who's obviously got a thing for young black male sex workers, and they keep showing up dead in his fucking property, and nothing is happening to this dude.
You're talking about Newsom?
No, it was one of his backers, one of his financial back. It's a guy here.
Like, wow, this is explosive.
Yeah, guy here in West Hollywood. Let me see this. West Hollywood, sex worker death, white billionaire. Who is this guy? Is this the one? Gamel Moore. Ed Buck is the guy. So yeah, I have this here. Let me pull it up I can pull it up on the screen.
By the way, that woman I was talking about earlier, her name is Nicole Hannah Jones. I just found her. Not Anna Nicole Smith.
Yeah, we're not racist. We just confuse them sometimes. Is that is allowed? Can we just go? It's hard. It's hard sometimes. Not about telling them apart. Hard. The names are too simple. Yeah. Let me see. Find this. Share screen. Here's the tab. So yeah, police launch probe. I remember this. This was all the way back in 2017. Launch probe into the death of gay male prostitute at prominent Democratic donor's home. And here it was. Gamel Moore, 26, found dead in West Hollywood, California, died at the home of Ed Buck, a high-profile Democratic donor. Let's see who Ed Buck is. Yeah, and by the way, police have asked for other alleged victims of Bucks to come forward. So when you look at who this guy is putting money into, let me make sure I didn't lose you.
I see Ted Lieu there.
Ted Lieu is one. Yeah, here's the criminal investigations. Oh, and it happened again in 2019. Timothy Michael Dean, a part-time adult film actor, died at Buck's home. So 2 inside 2 years.
Wow.
And then, yeah, the death had originally been ruled accidental methamphetamine overdose.
Yeah.
They charged Buck with additional felonies, was scheduled to go to trial 2021, but it was postponed. Okay, convicted of 9 federal charges, including these 2 deaths, minimum of 20 years. So he was just convicted last summer. But that, wow. I mean, it's like that kind of stuff that happens in the political sphere is just mind-blowing. You know, and it's like those types of things, you know, that should have been a huge scandal, right? That this man was not only charged with these crimes, but convicted. And when you look at the people that he donates money to, it's the who's who of California and national Democrats.
But I'm hearing for it for the first time on the Josh Denny show. So
yeah, which we shouldn't be breaking news to anybody, by the way. Our logo has a poop on it. We should, if you're coming to me for news, you are out of fucking luck.
But we kind of are, though. I mean, it's I had never heard that story.
Yeah, and that's why. And you spent how many years in Los Angeles? Quite a few, right?
Oh, I never lived in Los Angeles.
Oh, I thought you did.
Nope. Always lived in New York.
Oh, you were a New York actor. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I came to LA many times over the years, and I love Los Angeles, actually, despite it being a liberal shithole. But I do love LA, and I love the people, the conservative people. I like. There's some good folks in LA. But I never lived there.
So we're taking people through the journey, walk away. Now, this is one question I want to ask you, and it's perfect because we're kind of right up here at the our first hour. But in this moment when Walk Away is catching fire and taking off, did you at some point feel like you made the conscious decision of this is what I'm going to do now? Or did you feel sort of swept up in it like, wow, I've created a monster, it's snowballing, and all I can do is kind of hang on and for dear life and just go with my gut and follow my instincts? Or did it feel like a real conscious decision of I'm going to lead this movement and try to get people to understand what's really going on in the country?
That's a really cool question. I like that. So it was definitely a conscious decision. I knew I wanted to attempt it, and it did snowball very, very fast, and it got really big and almost a little out of hand really fast. But no, I feel like I handled it. I really do. I mean, I'm going to kind of give myself, I guess, that credit because it's still really hard. But there was like when it first started blowing up in those first 6 months, I was doing 5 to 12 media interviews every single day. And Yeah. In addition to, I was creating an organization and building a staff, and then we were starting to do live events. But the thing is, none of this could have happened, I think, if the conditions in my life weren't exactly what they were, because I had gotten sober. I don't know, at that time, I think 3 years before I started this. So I no longer had a compulsion to like go out and drink or do drugs or go partying. And because it's people don't realize, even if you don't have a problem, how much time they waste. It's such a time suck to go out
and
partying.
money as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
you know, I've never been a drinker or a drug user, and I just look at like what we spend on food a month, and I go, I can't even imagine if we also were like having bottles of wine at dinner, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I'm just like, who's living like this?
Yeah, well, so I was kind of, I was going sleepless nights and sometimes doing, 3-4 hours of sleep, and I would do an interview at midnight until 1 a.m. And then I'd get up and I'd do a 5 a.m. interview, and then I'd do a 7 a.m. interview. And it was, just spreading and spreading and spreading from coast to coast and around the world. I mean, I was doing international stuff too. No, I mean, I felt like I was kind of just, hanging on for dear life, but I really appreciated the whole time that like, who gets an opportunity like this? I mean, it's such a once in a lifetime thing. And I was like, I'm not going to just let it evaporate and go up and smoke. Like, I'm going to ride this ride. Like, this is awesome. Like, I love it. And I still feel that way, even with everything I'm going through right now and how horrible this last year has been. I still would rather be going through what I'm going through now than just, trying to do hair.
And what do you think it was about you specifically and WALKAWAY that resonated with so many people and so many young people? Because I feel like that WALKAWAY launched around the same time as a lot of these other movements, right? Blexit was happening, and you had a lot of a very similar sort of people from the left moving to the right, kind of grassroots efforts. What do you think it was about you and WALKAWAY specifically that caught fire and became what it was?
Well, I have to push back on one thing you just said. Like, none of those other movements were happening when I started WALKAWay. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. Honestly, I wouldn't have done it if there had already been something out there. I did it because there was no thing out there. And I needed it. Like, when I had my transitional experience, I lost most of my friends. I was very lonely in 2017, and I was desperately trying to find other people who had had this experience, because I felt like I was losing my mind. Like, I felt like I was going crazy, because everything that I believed in, I was now like reversing my position on and losing everything that had been important to me. And I was trying to find other people who had had this experience, and I couldn't find them. So I created that video that I put out, which went really viral. And then I just basically was like, if anyone else has had an experience like this, use this hashtag WALKAWAY and tell your story. And I created a group, the WALKAWAY campaign. And then very shortly, within months, we had tens of thousands. And then within a year, we had like 250,000 or something people that had joined, and they were making videos and testimonials. But with those other groups, that started more than 6 months after WALKAWay, because
I didn't realize you had that much of a jump on them.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, when I started WALKAWay, it was, again, in the month of May, and throughout that first summer in 2018, we had so many, Black people making testimonials, Hispanic people, gay people, white people, old, young, making testimonials. And what I feel like happened is that a lot of people who saw an opportunity to try, I think this happens all the time in politics, and it probably happens all the time in entertainment too, but people see like a door opening and they're thinking like, I want to elevate myself up by riding the wave of this thing that's already happening. And so all of these people were like, well, I'm going to be like the ambassador for all of the Hispanic people who are walking away. And I'm going to be the ambassador for all the Chinese people who are walking away. And I was kind of like, bitch, who needs you? Like, this is already happening.
Well, you and I bonded over this a year ago when we met, and we were kind of hanging out in that room afterwards. But I said, part of the problem with the individualistic nature of the right is that there is a tremendous lack of collaboration. And rather than people just reaching out to you and going, Brandon, how do we make WALKAWAY bigger? Or how do we get more Black people involved in WALKAWay? Everyone goes, I'm going to start the Black WALKAWay.
Right.
I'm going to start the Mexican WALKAWay.
The Chinese WALKAWay. Yeah.
I'm going to start the transgender Muslim dolphin identifying, that WALKAWay. And that's the same.
WALKAWay for people with type 2 diabetes. WALKAWay for people. Yeah. I mean, it was like out of control.
It gets so frustrating because that is where we lose, because the left is very good in terms of having a collectivist idea. And so they're very good at uniting under one or two banners and being effective in terms of strength in numbers, where we are very much like the militias of the Revolutionary War, and we're up against the British, who are in formation, large numbers, very organized, and we're literally all running around behind trees loading our muskets like a bunch of jerk-offs, because everybody has to do it their own way. And, I particularly run into that frustration with the number of like content providers now and social medias that there are. Like, there's 30 conservative Twitters, there's 30 conservative streaming networks, and it's very difficult for any of us to have strength in numbers and to really make a capitalistic push, united push, and pooling money together and doing those types of things to where we are a real bona fide threat to our enemies.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of like just business pieces of it that people don't understand at all. Like, for instance, I've had a lot of people come to me who are conservatives and be upset or frustrated with me and be like, we all have the same goal. Why don't you join forces with all of these other exit movements and work together? And I'm like, okay, that sounds really beautiful in this Pollyanna world, but like, here's just one example, and I could actually give you many, many more examples than this.
I'm certain of it. Yeah.
So there are at least, and I'm sure that I'm underestimating significantly, but I know that there are at least 3 organizations right now, or at least a couple of years ago, that were calling themselves Jexit, the Jewish exit movement. Okay, now listen to me. Now listen. Now, all of them were at odds with each other, like, because I was kind of watching this all happen behind the scenes. So 3 different Jexit organizations, all 3 of them have different leaders, and all of those leaders were at war with each other because they're like, no, mine's the real Jexit. No, mine's the real Jexit. No, mine's the real Jexit. So then one of these Jexits actually did survive, and I think the other 2 didn't. And it turned, I can't remember if it was one of the 3 or the one that survived. It doesn't even matter anymore. But they ended up getting busted with all of this donation fraud. And then also I went to their website, and I think I actually made a donation to their website just to check it out, because it was really weird, because they were saying, it was weird. It was like they were saying something about your donations will help veterans. And like, basically they were doing all this conservative speak, using all the conservative buzzwords, like helping veterans and whatever. So I made a donation. It just
smells like a grift because they're hitting all the points, right?
Totally. So I made a donation, and then I followed up later, and I was like, hey, can you let me know like how my money was used? And nobody got back to me. So I waited a week or 2 later, and I followed up again, and I was like, no, really, I made a donation for X amount of dollars. Can you I'm really curious how you're using my money. And no one ever answered me. And I'm like, so like, don't come to me and be like, well, just because somebody started an organization with, and changed the letter in front of the word exit, that I have an obligation now to work with these people and join forces with these people just because they're running Chexit or Jexit or Megxit or Hexit or whatever.
I'm going to start Jexit with a G, and it will be for gingers. Gingers who were liberal, who are now conservative. It'll be called SPF 50 Jexit.
Jingjet. No, I like
Jexit. That's what we'll call it. Jexit.
Jexit. Yeah, that's a good one. That's one I could get behind.
And we'll work with the people at Coppertone. We'll get them to be our primary backers. It's just, and it's one of my biggest frustrations, and it also how it's very much like segregated just based on our slight differences. Like, the Daily Wire makes conservative content, right? But it's all very family friendly and sort of religious, and it's all kind of the same. And and it's almost to the point now, I've told you, where it's like over at Censored and with Gavin, it's like we're like the punk rock conservatives who are mostly libertarian. And I feel like that's our segment is a lot of like walkaway type people who was like, I was an Obama, two-time Obama voting, libertarian liberal who wanted legalized drugs and legalized prostitution and, wanted to allow people more freedoms. And all of a sudden now wanting that kind of freedom puts you smack dab in the middle of the right. And
exactly.
And so it's, I would have been a prime example of a walkaway person who was like, I grew up my whole life thinking I was a liberal Democrat, voting Democrat. And then the whole thing shifted in front of me and I found myself on the right and everyone else that I very much agreed with politically on the right. And what was wild to me was when I started watching my liberal friends sort of applaud authoritarianism in the name of Democratic Party or in the name of democracy, I started thinking like, wow, this is really not in the spirit of what I thought we were all doing in the first place. And that sort of blind allegiance to party, even when they're doing like, if you're somebody who supports the government stepping in and telling companies that they have to fire employees who aren't getting vaccinated, how more authoritarian would it have to be before you step up and go, that's not what we all agree is right?
Well, that's why they have to shroud everything in this narrative of like that it's this faux morality kind of thing. It's not that you're being authoritative and telling people what they have to do. It's that you're saving lives. You're saving the lives of old people and people at risk, and forcing people to take medication. That's how they get away with it. So then you're like, oh, well, yeah, it's a little bit authoritarian for the government to force someone out of their job if they don't take the medication that I want them to take, but I'm saving lives, so I can feel good about myself while I do it.
Yeah, and this has long been my pushback with universal health care is that we can't. I love it in principle, and I think we can afford it. But the problem is when you look at the way our government administers these types of things is they won't just give the health care at first. They'll hire 1 million people to administer this program, and they'll spend your tax dollars to do that. And then they'll put in all these controls in place that say, if you don't do these 10 to 20 things, you don't get to qualify for our free government health care. And then essentially what we have is now trading freedoms for convenience and safety at your own expense, the own expense of your tax dollars. So then it's like, well, if my option is to be taxed less and make my own healthcare choices and maintain my freedoms, then I want that. But the only way that government should ever be taking things away from the private sector is if they have a provable method that is ultimately more efficient and helpful for the public, to where it becomes almost a basic municipality and not authoritarianism. And we haven't seen that demonstrated in the American system of government since our inception. Government has never improved something by taking it over.
Well, no, and I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, when something as important as healthcare or anything else, I mean, the government fucks up everything. Why on earth would you want to make the government the solution to anything?
Right.
I think that's vital or important. Josh, I got to tell you, right? I have an AA meeting in less than 30 minutes, and
all right, cool.
Just so your audience knows, I'm on house arrest, and I only get to get out of the house if I go to an AA meeting, and so I have to drive across town to get to it. What should we do?
We'll wrap up the regular show here. And kind of talking about the January 6th stuff kind of fits into the after show. So we'll wrap this part here. We'll jump right into the after show. And people, by the way, if you want to hear Brandon talk about his experience on January 6th and what he's been going through recently, you can catch the full episode on Rockfin, where we'll be now. Otherwise, you can catch the bonus Talking Shit show on my locals. Go to joshdennylocals.com, where you can hear the full episodes of this podcast ad-free, as well as the full bonus show. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. You guys can go visit brandonstraka.com with a second silent A at the end there.
God.
And you can contribute to his legal defense fund related to January 6th, which I was going to ask you, sort of, where was the moment where you're like, wow, this thing got way too big, way too quick.
And now I'm in prison. Yeah.
And now there's a thing, but obviously, we're kind of building to the head of culmination of how you went from being creating this sort of grassroots movement, ending up to sort of being like one of the primary figureheads of the January 6th takedown. So we'll get into that briefly in the after show. But before we do that, thank you so much for coming on and doing a pod.
Thank you, Josh.
Hey, everybody. It's Friday. We're doing the second part of our interview with the one and only Brandon Straka. We normally do this as a bonus show, but because we kind of ran up against time in the beginning and we didn't want to cut it short, we'll be releasing this out for everybody to check out. So without further ado, we'll get back into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Straka. What's up, buddy?
Hey. Good to be back.
So,
Been
good
too
to
long.
be back. Good to have you. You know, it's a little tricky with everything you got going on. You're a busy guy. So, you know, we got to get a little creative this week and it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, busy is there's a lot of qualifiers that go along with that. I mean, it's the biggest problem I'm having right now is that I'm only allowed out of my house certain scheduled times per week. And we were running up against one of my scheduled times per week. And it's pretty, I mean, obviously, if I were not on house arrest, this would not be an issue. I'd just be like, I'll go to, the supermarket later or whatever. But knowing that if I skip that, I can't go for another 7 days. Right. I'm like, Josh, I gotta go.
Yeah. No, I get it. Dude, I was going to ask you, do you feel like Professor Claw and Inspector Gadget because you have to run everything from inside the office now? Like, I imagine like there are moments where you're just like, I'm trying to run an organization, but I can't leave the chair. It's like, I feel like a supervillain.
Yeah, it's super annoying. And it would be great to have the option to be able to go. And I mean, I've had to give up a couple of really big things during this 3 months because they're things that could only happen if I were present in person. I mean, one of those, like I couldn't go to CPAC. There's a major interview that it still is supposed to be happening, but I've put it off until the beginning of May. But it makes me really nervous because, the news cycle changes so much. I mean, scheduling 2 months from now, I can only hope that the person is still interested in doing it. I think it will happen. But I mean, if I could have just jumped on a plane and gone and done it, it would have been a lot better.
Would have been done, and you would have felt like you could have seized the moment.
Yep.
Well, the cool thing is we do. So this will kind of be like a hybrid second part because we usually do a bonus show just for subscribers, but I didn't want to kind of cut the story short the last time. And some of what we were about to get into in, the whole story of WALKAWAY to where you are now kind of lines up with some of our bonus show questions. And one of the first ones I always like to ask guests is what's the shittiest thing that's ever happened to you? And I imagine it's probably what you just went through as the WALKAWAY movement grew and expanded, and it kind of landed you as one of the main featured speakers at the protest on January 6th. And so I guess tell everybody kind of how WALKAWAY ended up there and what the plan was, and then how things kind of unraveled from that day forward.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, it wasn't WALKAWAY, and that's like an important distinction.
Okay. My mistake.
No, it's okay. I went completely as a private citizen because it's not WALKAWAY just wasn't involved in any of the discussions about election fraud or election integrity, but I got involved with that as a private citizen, Brandon Straka. And so I was doing some rallies around the country, just encouraging people to keep pressure on their state legislators, telling them that they wanted a forensic audit of the votes, that a lot of people were feeling really like there were some really strange irregularities that were taking place with the election. And then
I'm amazed at how much pushback, and maybe you were too, but how much pushback there was, where I was so shocked that people on the left and liberals, and even just in my friend groups, were so like, oh, the idea of stealing an election is insane. And I go, wait a minute, didn't we all agree that one was stolen in 2000? Like we all watched the Bush family steal an election in 2000, and it was a general consensus amongst liberal people that the fix was in because of the Florida situation and the recount situation. So it's like, it's not that, I mean, I'm not so far removed from that where I remember like it was a pretty touted mainstream narrative that election was less than on the up and up. And then there are literally videos coming out every hour from the election to the point of the inauguration where you're seeing people dump ballots and people pulling out bags and suitcases and like throwing ballots away. And so we had so much more proof because of technology in 2020 that it certainly wasn't flawless. than we did in 2000. And yet somehow people were like, there's no evidence of anything.
Yeah, and there wasn't. I mean, some of the examples too were much more than just speculation about like people pulling out suitcases and stuff. I mean, certainly that raised eyebrows and some questions, but I mean there were more just even practical things like people saying that there were enormous amounts of ballots that were counted that arrived after the due date, the mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
Many of the ballots in the drop boxes didn't have signatures. I mean, like very real and practical things. And again, I don't think I'm on record one single time as saying, absolutely, Donald Trump would have won this election if not for this. All I've ever said is, can we please audit the vote? Because there are tens of millions of people who are feeling like this election was not handled legitimately, and they're not going to stop feeling that way. And that's a really bad thing. I mean, to your point, I think you were saying is like, this is not the first time that we've ever questioned an election, which is true. Yeah. But I think my point is more, everyone should, if it were reversed, if Trump had come out the declared winner of 2020, but there were 60, 70 million people on the other side of the aisle going, there's all these irregularities and we don't buy it, I would be the one going, let's audit the vote. Like, if my guy wins, I want to feel confident, like we won, and like, I want to like hold my head up high and be like, there's no questioning this. We won.
Well, and so for me, so much of the sentiment was feeling maybe the way you felt. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think a lot of us felt like this is nowhere near reflective of what feels like the will of the people. And granted, there is a little bit of bias for and some of the events we go to, the people we surround ourselves with. But like, even in my travels going around the country, it felt like it was going to be a dominant landslide in Trump's favor. And so for it to swing so far the other way, and for the numbers to be so astronomically high in terms of overall voter turnout, it's like more people vote. I think there was a statistic that came out in some counties, like more people voted for Joe Biden than voted for Barack Obama or in the Barack Obama elections in total. And it's like the population hasn't gone up that much. But for them to say that like voter turnout in some of these places doubled from even like Obama's elections tells you that it's just we haven't made that many new people. That many new people have not come of voting age. So to me, it just seemed like it just didn't pass the litmus test or the smell test for me when I see the turnouts at Biden's rallies, the people in terms of supporting him vocally. I just felt like there was so much more energy behind the right and behind Trump than there was on the left. So for him to have gotten more votes than Obama in both elections was shocking to me. And the sales pitch was, well, these aren't votes for Biden so much as they're votes against Trump. And, that just, the numbers didn't really jive for me to believe that.
Right. I think they didn't jive for a lot of people. And also, I think it's kind of indisputable that the result wouldn't have been what it was if it weren't for mail-in voting, because all of these changes began on November 5th. The election day was November 3rd or
November
4th?
6th, I think, is election day. I don't remember.
I think it was the 4th, November 4th. November 3rd. I can't remember if election day was November 3rd or 4th, but it was the day after that the totals completely changed. What?
It would have. Oh, it was the 2nd.
No, it was the 3rd or the 4th.
Oh, hold on. Sorry. I'm looking at 2021. I'm a whole year away.
Wait, November.
It was November 2020.
Right. The 3rd.
The 3rd. Yeah. It was the 3rd.
So, right. So then it would have been like November 4th that the totals began to completely change. And that's because they say, well, we started counting the mail-in ballots. Well, the whole thing with that was that we have a constitutional process for changing election laws, state by state, and it's supposed to happen only through the state legislatures. But, what was at least being said, and I certainly again would like to have a thorough investigation, is that these changes weren't really being made through the proper channels state by state, but the governors were signing executive orders because of COVID. And, there were kind of just these like sweeping reformations that were being made, but not going through the right process. And the thinking was, oh, well, we're in a pandemic, so we have to, but it's like that. You don't get to just change the rules because you're in a pandemic. And that was another thing where people were just kind of pushing their will on other people and being like, well, it's COVID. You're going to try to prevent people from voting because there's a pandemic, and it's like, no, but this pandemic has been going on all year long. I mean, there was plenty of time to change these rules appropriately, and that wasn't done. And now all of a sudden you've got like, an inappropriate process for changing these rules. And then you're just saying, oh, and here's like 1 billion votes that all came in for one candidate, and we found them in the drop boxes, and some don't have signatures. And it's like, come on.
Well, and when you say inappropriate, it's not only that, but illegal. Like, wasn't there situations in some of the states, I think Pennsylvania was one of them, where the governing body who made the decision on which ballot, like which mail-in ballots would be taken or whatever, I think in Pennsylvania was one of them, didn't even have the authority to make those election day changes or calls. Like, so it was like those things would have had to have been run through the state legislature, and they weren't. It was like an election official made that decision. And so to your point, it was like so much of it was rushed. So much of it was not done through the proper legal channels or done the right way. And what's amazing is now a lot of these state legislator positions and stuff, they're getting thrown out in their election cycles. And you have people like Bill Maher that are going, well, now the Republicans are trying to fix it the other way. And it's like, listen, I don't believe we've had a flawless election in the history of American politics. There's probably been fuckery in all of them. The problem is when there's so much of it that the American people lose faith in the democratic process altogether. And I think that's really more what doesn't get talked about with the people that were there and upset on January 6th was like, listen, we know we're an imperfect system and we're a nation of flaws and a nation of flawed individuals, but to skim over that like it doesn't fucking matter because we got what we wanted is not okay. And I feel like that was more what the people on J6 were upset about than necessarily their guy not winning. Now, you were there on the ground. I mean, does that test out, or do you think I'm wrong and it was very much about their guy not winning?
Well, I mean, my impression of, I've never spoken to anyone who expressed a sentiment other than that they were there to stand up and say that they wanted an audit of the vote, that they didn't want people to charge forward with certification before they felt that the vote had been thoroughly audited. And what people were told was that instead of, moving forward with certification, Mike Pence was going to call for like a 10-day reprieve to call for this audit and put people's minds at ease, I guess, about that. And so this is another thing that I think is so upsetting about the media reporting about that event and that day is that if you're to believe the media, everyone showed up to basically storm the Capitol and to, threaten Congress to say Trump is the president, reinstate Trump. And I don't know anyone, I didn't feel that way. That wasn't my position. I don't know anyone else who felt that way either. Like, we're not lunatics. Like, it wasn't this wasn't about trying to, falsely instill a president that the people didn't vote for. It was about let's just make sure that everyone's vote counted correctly and that we've done this the right way.
Yeah. And that's kind of how everyone I know that was there or that, talked about it leading up to that. That was the thing of we want to make sure this is all being vetted. And when people like Fleckus are literally going into the Michigan voting registry and showing you how many dead people voted with mail-in ballots, it's like finding one smoking gun example of that in the country should be enough for us to put on the brakes and go, let's just hold on and make sure that this is all legit. And the fact that everybody was in our government was so quick to dismiss that, I think gave the American people some cause for concern to say, wait a minute, we elected these people to do the right thing, and they're definitely not doing the right thing, regardless of outcome.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of, if you look at a whole number of other issues throughout the years in which Democrats have just forced their will. I mean, even if you look at like social justice issues and stuff where Republicans are constantly having to defend themselves against, you know, being racist or being homophobic or whatever. And look what's happening right now with this Florida bill that has nothing to do with silencing gay people. It has nothing to do with whatever, but they've manufactured this crisis that isn't real once again. And they're out there making everyone believe that people are trying to prevent people from saying the word gay or talking about this in schools. This is just one example of how Republicans have watched time and time and time again as they've gotten steamrolled by people who are completely dishonest, borderline crazy, if not absolutely lunatics, living in a fake reality that isn't real. And now you've got all of those people saying, no, nothing was wrong with the election. Everything was perfect. Nothing was wrong. Shut your mouth, accept this result. Joe Biden is the most popular candidate in American history. And all of these people are
more
going
than
like,
Kennedy, more than
right.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't feel right. Like, and I like, no, I like if you had a track record of being reputable and honest and like live it like a person who's existing in reality, you know, maybe, but your track record is of being consistently crazy. And you're the one telling me to shut up and just accept what you're saying. Right. And that doesn't sit well with me. You know, I think that's how people felt.
Yeah, good time, by the way, to plug. I'm going to share my tab here. Good time to plug. You'll be doing a Twitter Spaces on the 14th about the Don't Say Gay thing.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. I plan to attend and give it a listen because you got some yourself on there, but also some really great, you know, people that I like, Mike Harlow. So I think you guys will have some really good conversation about, you know, the Don't Say Gay Florida bill. And that's what's concerning, I think, about a lot of like the narrative and the legislation that we're seeing is that so much of it is just sort of absconded from truth entirely.
First of all, it looks like there's a penis right sitting at the description of the event under my name over there. What is that black and yellow penis?
It's my logo. It's a J with a poop on top of it.
Well, it looks
there we
like
go. Does that make
dick.
you feel better? We take it off?
I didn't say I felt bad. I was just saying it looked like you put a big dick on top of my tweet.
Well, listen, I could make a joke about the fact that, of course, you would think it's a dick because there's shit on it.
That should have been beneath you.
But it's not. It's not beneath me.
I want to tell you a little bit about how this event came to be because I'm actually very proud of it. So when all these people on the left started going crazy, and this happened so fast, like someone invented this "Don't Say Gay" thing, and then they turned it into a hashtag, and then it spread really fast, and then Hollywood D-list celebrities got all like crazy and were like, "Oh my God, they're trying to stop people from saying gay in Florida," and then it quickly spread. Now Disney is like getting involved, and Disney's like, "Oh, we've got to take action against Florida for what." I mean, it has spread into insane. It spread faster than COVID. The crazy behind this "Don't Say Gay" thing. So I did something even crazier than that. I read the bill. And I was like, wow, it actually is absolutely nothing like what these people are saying that it is. So then I just reached out to the Florida state representatives who wrote and sponsored the bill, and they got on the phone with me really quickly. They were like, yeah, this is like an avalanche of insanity that's happening. And I was like, hey, what if we just did like a Twitter Spaces event about this? And they're like, we love that idea. And so this guy over here on the left, that's Florida Representative Joe Harding. He actually wrote the bill. Super nice guy, not anti-gay at all. Super cool guy. And then the guy in the middle there with the suit and tie is Florida Representative John Snyder. And the girl in between both of them is Governor Ron DeSantis's press secretary, Christina Pushaw. I shouldn't have said girl, woman, in between the two of them. So we have three really kind of heavy hitters in terms of officials out of Florida. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we added some LGBT, well, just gay conservatives to join the panel. But we're going to break it down on Twitter Spaces Monday night. And I'm really proud of how this all kind of came together fast. But it's like, this is again, I'll never understand why Republicans, like people in positions of power in the Republican Party, have blatantly ignored WALKAWAY and they blatantly ignored me. But this is called taking action, just so you guys understand. Like, this is how you fight back against the left. You know, and if any of you in the Republican Party ever want to give me a call and, you know, maybe ask a few questions about why WALKAWAY's done so well, I'm happy to be here for you, because this is how we fight back against the left. This is how you do it.
And you've really got the who's who here, because yourself, I mean, Mike Harlow and Christian Walker. I'm not familiar with David Leatherwood, but I can certainly tell you that, between the three of you, I think you're, the heavy hitters in terms of like contradicting the archaic narrative about conservatism and Republicans in general, that it's anti-gay. Christian, Mike, and yourself are some of the biggest conservative influencers. And it's beyond a the first thing the left will do is they go, well, yeah, they have tokenism across the board. Like they'll say Candace is, the rights token black person, or they'll call you or Mike or Christian the token Republican gays. But it's like, how many do there have to be making exceptionally great points before you realize that it's not about tokenism. It's about truth. It's about reality. And it's about how people really feel.
Yeah, when you deal with here's one thing about the left that I will say, almost to their credit, they get in your head. I mean, they really get inside your head, and then they kind of start it's like a worm that crawls around. And because as soon as I put this together, I looked at it, I was like, oh God, they're going to say that there's no diversity, there's no trans people, there's no, there's no lesbians, but they're, and then I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. Who cares? Because, at the end of the day, they're the ones who hate gay men. They hate gay men more than anybody. So I could have put a bunch of trans conservatives on this panel. Wouldn't have made any difference. The truth is, honestly, at this point, I would almost rather get the attention of gay men and just be like, hey guys, just so you know, those of you who are still sticking with the left, they hate you. Like they hate you more. The lesbians hate you. The trans people hate you. So, you don't have to become a Republican if you don't want to, but they're going to burn you at the stake over on that side.
And you made a very great point. You made a very great point in the first part of this episode, part one, where you talked about the fact that like, being a gay man is almost like no longer considered, being part of a marginalized or historically oppressed group. It's almost like now they just lump you in as a man, or particularly like a white man. Like the distinguishment between gay and straight for white men doesn't matter at all anymore. And you even went on to say, really doesn't matter anymore with black men either.
Right. Oh, they're not going to look at Christian and see him as like a person of color, or, be like, oh, he brings that diversity to the panel of, the racial minority. No, they're going to be like, he's a man. He's a man. He's a gay man. And he's a conservative gay man. So, so we hate him. So, but I still think there's an opportunity, because part of me was just like, oh God, do I add more people, which is going to make the panel too big? But because I know trans people that are concerned that I could have gotten to do this panel.
Yeah. Blair. There's a number of them.
Yeah, and then I was like, you know what? Let's just break down what the bill is, and then let's give gay men an opportunity to see other gay men who are not making this choice anymore. Like, we're done with the left, and you should be too, because trust me, they're done with you.
So going back to, I'm glad we were able to plug that in the middle, because I think it's important.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I definitely want to make sure people attend and give it a listen. And also, by the way, I encourage people that especially that do not consider themselves conservative in any way, to go listen to it, because I think you might wake up to some things that you weren't aware of and didn't know about. But go ahead.
Sorry, just really quickly. And also, they'll get a chance. Like, if you don't like what we're saying, or if you want to debate us or argue or make your, you'll get to talk. This isn't going to be just you have to listen to us. Yes, we are going to talk about the bill. We're going to break things down, but anyone in the audience can raise their hand, and we will give you the opportunity to speak and ask your questions. I mean, if you're just going to come and, scream that we're Nazis or insurrectionists or something, no. But if you want to actually debate something and tell us that we're full of shit, bring it on.
Yeah.
Come.
Yeah.
What?
No, I just laughed. You said, bring it on. Come. And I go, yeah, it sounds like a gay event. We encourage everyone to come. Oh, yeah, this is what I knew it was going to be. But anyway, going back to January 6th, you're a scheduled speaker. It's not a walkaway event, but you're there as a concerned citizen, right? And somebody who wants to make sure this is upheld. I guess kind of walk us through how that day unfolded, and then what is where it's kind of gone from there. And what was interesting was when you and I met for the first time a year ago, you were right in the middle of going through all the post January 6th stuff and still dealing with it. And the stress, I can only imagine of what the last 18 months has been like.
Yeah. So Yeah. So on January 6th, after President Trump spoke, I was headed to the Capitol because I was actually asked to be a speaker at an event that was a second event that was taking place at the Capitol. So it was supposed to be President Trump speaks, then a march, and then, this second event. And there were literally like dozens, maybe 3 dozen or more people scheduled to speak. And so I was on my way. And as I was approaching the grounds, I started getting messages, and this would have been around like 2:20, 2:25, something like that PM. I started getting messages from people who were at home watching on television saying, people were going inside the building, and, I wasn't there. So I didn't really know what that meant exactly, but it sounded unusual and interesting. And
just a side note, an interjection as somebody who wasn't there but was watching it live on TV. At no point when I was watching it did it ever feel like it was dangerous or intended to be dangerous. Like it literally felt like people have said this, but it kind of felt like a guided tour. Like the angle I watched first live was they opened the front doors and like let everybody in. It wasn't until I started to see other compilations of people like going in through windows and that other stuff. And the way you explained it to me was that it's quite different depending on which side, like literal side, east or west, that you were on in terms of what you saw.
Right. So, I was advancing forward, and at that point, I started getting messages from some of the other speakers too, who were sort of like, "What's going on? Like, is our event still happening? Is it not happening?" People were very confused, and I still didn't even know what was happening. So at that point, I started just recording a video when I was probably about 3 blocks away from the Capitol, and I just shot one long continuous video as I entered the grounds from the east side. And in my video, no one has to take my word for it. Just watch the video, which, by the way, after people watch this interview, I recommend that they go to YouTube and Google or search for my interview with Mark Levin on his YouTube channel, Levin TV. He and I did an interview about 4 or 5 weeks ago in which we actually show my video and we kind of break it down moment by moments with commentary. And so what you'll notice,
it's really great for anybody who hasn't seen it yet.
Very good. And it was nice to have. Yeah, it was nice to have Mark's perspective. In addition, because obviously I'm too close to it. I have my own feelings. But
you were living it.
Yeah, but he's watching it and just kind of going like, I'm not understanding why you were thrown in jail over this. But so I'm entering the grounds, and there's a few things you'll notice when you're watching the video. The first is that there are no police officers. And I don't mean few, I mean zero police officers anywhere on the grounds on the east side.
Which is rare for any public event of not even close to that scale. Like an event with 100 people gathering outside of a building in Washington would have 2 or 3 police officers, just in case.
Yeah. Well, there are 0 in my video. And then as I'm walking onto the grounds, you see people kind of calmly milling around, and there are thousands of people and this is on the east side again. And there are, thousands of people just kind of milling about, and I'm walking down the sidewalk, and I started kind of narrating. And I think I said, there's thousands of people around. I don't know. I said a couple of other things, and then I walked closer to the building, and as I got closer to the building, because the people were all collected kind of like on the stairs, and there's lots and lots and lots and lots of stairs.
Yeah.
And I mean literally thousands of people like gathered together there. And then as I'm approaching the stairs, I see a man standing there with his hat in his hand. Again, this is in the video, and he's motioning down to the people below with his hat in his hand, and he's shouting, "They've opened the doors. They're letting us in. We're going inside. We're going in." And that's
what I saw. I saw that televised.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Where it was like, where they showed them like waving people in. Not that specifically, but I remember seeing them like sort of waving people in. And then like when they were inside, the people were like inside the velvet ropes and everything. So I am at some points when I cut into the broadcast, I was feeling like, I thought they were gonna let them speak. You know what I mean? Like I had this weird feeling of like, oh, maybe Congress is going to let them come in and state their case or something, or speak, or they'll at least address I didn't know what the fuck was happening.
Right. Well, and that's, this is the other thing too, is that I'm now sort of expected to, and I think every person who got arrested in conjunction with this is expected to somehow like bear the burden of what the event ended up kind of being, even though we didn't have knowledge of any of that,
Right.
So I'm approaching on the east side. This guy's hollering down. I walk up to the top of the stairs where he is. And when I got there were several hundred people at the top of the stairs. There's 2 large metal doors which were open, and some of the people were trying to make their way in, and some were just kind of standing there, like doing nothing. And so I took my camera and I started filming everything that I was seeing. And I stood there for about 8 minutes filming the people trying to kind of make their way in, and I'm kind of narrating this is not a live video, but that's another thing that was completely misreported, that I was filming live,
That you were streaming.
that I was streaming, and I wasn't. And the reason why that's relevant and important to me is because I made a conscious decision later, hours later, to go back to my hotel room and upload my video, and the accusations against me are that I was involved in all this criminal activity, and yet I still made the conscious decision to upload this video to Twitter, showing myself doing these criminal acts. Okay. So anyway, so I'm saying,
yeah, I mean, it would have been a bonehead criminal move if you had conspired in any way or had any intention of doing anything that was illegal or even ill-advised to then go on and post proof of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that one could maybe argue that if I were streaming live to Twitter or Facebook or something, that maybe something happened and I lost my mind and I got swept into something, and then I made a bad decision and I did it on a live video, and maybe I could kind of, but I mean, to get swept up into something and make a bad decision, and then 2 hours later be like, I'm going to show my 700,000 Twitter followers what I just did. Like,
yeah.
But anyway, so I'm standing there filming, and then after about 8 minutes, a man comes outside of the building and gets on a bullhorn, and he says, they've cleared Congress. Everybody left the building. Turn around and clear out, clear out. So I immediately turned around. Again, this is all on video. Turn around, and I even told the people behind me, they're saying to clear out, clear out. And, no one listened to me. So I just went down the stairs. And for about the next 20 minutes or so, I just started interviewing people on the grounds and taking footage of things and asking people, like, what did you see? What did you experience? And then I went back to my hotel room. And by the time I got back to my hotel room, it was probably like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. And then I uploaded that video, the 10-minute video that I had originally shot, to Twitter. And I basically just said, like, this is what I saw today at the Capitol. Now, to be really honest with you and everyone, I did say some really stupid things that day on Twitter. And by that, I mean, I didn't know yet what had happened on the other side of the building, because it's the west side of the building is where people were scaling walls and the smoke bombs and breaking windows and all that stuff. Like, that was on the opposite side of the building. I didn't see any of that. And so I saw people on social media being like, oh my God, we're so ashamed of the people at the Capitol. Oh my God, the people who went inside the building. Now, I thought they were talking about what I saw. I thought they were talking about, like, the people walking through the open doors. Now, I can appreciate if that was not appropriate, and I can appreciate if it was illegal for people to go inside the, but I mean, people were literally being like, this is the most shameful thing we've ever seen. And I'm thinking, the doors were open.
And we just watched half the country burn over the George Floyd thing. So it's like, wait, what are we talking about? This is civil unrest. This is what it looks like.
Well, yeah, right. And it's like, after you witnessed all of the brutality that had taken place for months, and now this is suddenly the most shameful thing that you've ever seen or experienced in your life. And so I started kind of like arguing with people and becoming kind of indignant on Twitter about, because again, I thought that what I saw was like the totality of the Capitol breach. Yeah. And so then it was about an hour or so after that I started to see footage on the news of people smashing windows and scaling walls and smoke bombs and stuff. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I was shocked. And so then it became really clear to me really fast that, okay, a lot more happened today than I know. And I don't have the full story here at all. So I knew, I was like, okay, you've got to distance yourself from this because you spoke too soon. So I took my video down and I took all my tweets down, like, immediately that night. And I was just like, okay, clearly I don't have all the facts here. And but still never, like, did it occur to me that I would be that it would be considered that I was involved in something criminal. I mean, that just was not even in my head.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of moved on from it. I flew home the next day, and honestly, I didn't look backward. I was just sort of like, it was, that day was a disaster. It was, it turned out to be pretty embarrassing for all of us. And now we just have to kind of move forward. And then it was about 2.5 weeks after that, on Monday, January 25th, an FBI SWAT team came into my apartment and in the early morning, got me out of bed and put me in handcuffs and took me to jail and presented me with a search warrant and started taking my property. And they took me to jail, and I sat in jail for several days before a judge finally ordered my release. And then that began what has been just an absolute nightmare for the last year as I worked through this criminal case through the federal courts.
Well, and one of the things I remember when we first met and spoke, one of the sentiments you shared was just like, man, I just, I just feel like they're really, really coming at me hard for the level at which I participated or didn't participate compared to a lot of other people. And I was pretty quick to say, well, that's more about what you represent and about your reach than it is about what you actually did. But I'm sure going through that experience, it's maybe sometimes hard to step back and see it from that perspective, because at the end of the day, you just feel persecuted.
Yeah. Well, and first of all, they weren't even really shy about saying that as the case progressed. Yeah. I mean, at the time that I saw you, which I remember was the month of April 2021, there wasn't yet that much of a narrative from their side of the aisle about me or what they felt like should be done to me or whatever. That started to unfold.
They hadn't really started to build the case against you that they were going to try to make.
Right. And that started to happen later in the second half of the year of 2021. But then when they finally did that, I mean, they were openly saying like he's a social media influencer. He has a huge following. And see, this is another thing that drives me crazy about this world that we live in today. And again, it's almost like a perfect segue to what's happening in Florida right now. People just don't read or research, and they'll jump to the worst possible conclusion when the evidence is right. Anything is right there in front of you. So a lot of these people who are prosecuting me or involved in my prosecution, at least they claim they hadn't heard of WALKAWAY. Okay, that's fine. Like if you haven't heard of WALKAWAY, no big deal. But how about just Google it?
Yeah.
Or go to my website, or anything. Instead, I mean, I was sitting in court hearings where like lawyers and judges were talking, and they're like, Mr. Straka is a part of this WALKAWAY movement. We don't know if these people are involved in, they were just being like, we don't know if this is a dangerous organization. We don't know if Mr. Straka's followers were, prompted by him to storm the Capitol. And I'm like,
yeah, I mean, they're sort of pretending, they're playing ignorant to paint it in the worst possible light.
We have the internet.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing that concerns me is, and I want to ask you this question. So one of the things I've rolled my eyes at for a lot of years is when people say, when you're a public figure in any way, you have a responsibility to use your platform for good, right? And I think a lot of us do what we think is best with that. What concerns me about it is it almost seems now that sentiment has extrapolated from you have a moral responsibility to use your platform for good. And now we've gone so far, like we've jumped the shark with that so far to where if anyone who subscribes to your platform or enjoys your platform, therefore then goes and does something bad, you're responsible for that too. And it's like, I've always said, listen, as a comedian, I do what I think is funny, but I don't control who my fans are and who my followers are. And I have no responsibility for what they might wrongfully or willingly misinterpret about what I say or do that then leads to them going on and taking action in their own lives. And what's concerning to me about that is it's almost like they've taken you have a responsibility to use your platform to now we're going to hold you legally responsible for what your platform accomplishes, whether it was your intention or not. And that is fucking horrific. And we've seen that happen with the Proud Boys is a great example where Gavin starts this group. It's a drinking group. It's intended to be buddies fucking around like an old men's club. Next thing you know, Gavin starts going to political events, giving conservative speeches. And his fans who were part of this group go, and then Antifa shows up and tries to harm him and other speakers, and his boys defend him. And the next thing you know, they're a hate group. And so it's like, it's amazing to me how this kind of stuff, you're watching this play out in many ways where the media can literally go, if the Unabomber back in the 90s listened to Howard Stern, then Howard Stern is responsible for the Unabomber. I mean, that's kind of the way that we've completely unraveled personal responsibility in the name of influence and celebrity. And they're doing it big time right now with Joe Rogan and the medical and misinformation stuff.
Well, I also like, who gets to decide what good is using
right? That's so subjective.
My argument is that I am, because to me, what I believe to be the good of our country is exposing the lies and manipulations and exploitations of the left. I think that their arguments are rarely based in any factual basis or truth. I think that they lie and manipulate and deceive, and that I think that they cause racial division and unrest. I think that they cause minority communities to be suspended in a constant state of fear, which makes them reactionary and hateful and causes all these problems.
A mindset of victimhood, which we talked about with Adam Coleman on the last episode.
Right. But the point is that, you know, when I do the things I do with my platform, I'm doing that because I think that exposing that stuff is in the greater good. But there are many people, including people in positions of power, unfortunately, people like judges, people like politicians, who would look at my content on my platform and say, you're not supporting the racial justice movement of Black Lives Matter. You're not supporting, you know, the LGBT community with the things that you say. That's not good. That you're using your platform for evil. You're right. You know, and so and in that case, and I did feel like that was happening in my case numerous times when they would take various posts that I wrote completely out of context. And one, you know, in my sentencing recommendation, which was 30 pages long for my misdemeanor charge, the government, you know, put together a story. And they were taking bits of things that I had said either in political speeches or social media posts and creating sentences based off of various words from various sentences that they strung together. Like one example is in my sentencing recommendation, one of the things that they said was something like, Mr. Strzok told his patriots that it was time for a civil war and that we were going to have a revolution and we were going to not take it anymore. Like they took 4 isolated things from 4 isolated sentences and put a sentence together. And I'm like, I never said that. I never said patriots, it's time for a civil war. You know, grab your muskets.
Yeah, they made it sound like it was one connected thought, right?
Yeah.
Like, my God, what people could claim I said if they cut clips together from any podcast I've done over the last 15 years.
Yeah, and the judge was like very upset with me, and she kept saying, you know, like basically that I was not using my social media for good. And
see, that bothers me. Well, that's a very big cause for concern.
I know, but my point is that like we started getting very close in the courtroom. I felt like to almost them telling me what to write on my social media. Like I thought we were getting that close because it was almost like, why aren't you saying this? Why aren't you? I mean, the judge actually said several times, she was like, you could have said this to your followers. You could have said that. And I'm like, it's my account. Like,
I don't want the judge having an opinion on what you should or can say at all outside the scope of the legality of it. That concerns me because isn't justice supposed to be blind?
Wait, and it's my account.
But she shouldn't have a fucking opinion about it at all. And the fact that she would boldly share it in the courtroom is astounding to me. If that were a jury trial and I were a juror in that, I would have been like, throw this out. I don't want a judge that has an opinion.
If you're a person at any station in life, whether you're, again, a politician, a judge, the president, whatever, if that's what you wish to see on social media, please open an account and write that.
Right.
But don't tell me what to write with my account.
100%. 100%. I mean, that was one of the things I got into with the Food Network at one point where they were like, you know, well, with the show doing the numbers it's doing and everything, maybe you could like tone down your political stuff and maybe don't be so. And I'm like, what? No. If you want to pay, you're paying me to host a show. If you want to pay me to shut the fuck up, that's a new check. You're gonna have to write another check. You know what I mean? You're gonna have to buy my silence.
Yeah.
It's insane to me, like that. It has gone from you should really use your platform for good, to like I have a different opinion of what good is, and now I'm going to force that down your throat. And by the way, I'm a judge with a position of power.
Yeah, well, and again, a lot of it came from the prosecution, but yeah, and so that's what kind of started this whole thing. And the case got dragged out for over a year, and it was an absolute nightmare. And it, in many ways, I'm still paying for that 8 minutes that I stood outside. I never went inside the building on January 6th. They know that I didn't.
We've had people on the show that have, like Sean Weitzman was on the show. Sean was a independent journalist who went inside the building. And I believe
did he get charged?
Yeah, he did get charged, I believe. And I don't know if he's been sentenced yet or not. I think he's still awaiting his sentencing.
Did he take a plea deal?
I don't believe he did.
Well, then the first trial was just the other day. So if he's going to trial, it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, let me see.
But if he's getting sentenced, that means he took a plea deal.
Yeah, it's a knowingly entering or remaining. Yeah, so his charges are knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority, disorderly and disruptive conduct in a restricted building or grounds, violent entry and disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds, parading, demonstrating, or picketing in a Capitol building. Here's his justice page. Arrested 4-6, initial appearance held 4-7, detention held 4-15, defendant placed on personal recognizance bond, charged via criminal information 421, arraigned 510, status conference set for 9/14. I think I had Sean on maybe a week before that. So shame on me as a shitty friend. I haven't followed up to find out what happened with him. You just lose touch with people.
Yeah. Almost everyone is taking a plea deal. And so I would imagine he will too. There are very few people who are going to trial. That's another thing too, is one of the most hurtful things I think about this whole process is that I honestly believed that after going through a year of being just tortured and brutalized and intimidated and threatened and like having my life ripped to shreds, that I would come out the other side after like a year and there would be like this warm embrace by the conservative community. Like, oh my God, we got you. Like you made it. You're good. You're on the other side. And then like right as I approached the finish line, these a small number of conservative, I mean, they're supposedly conservatives. I actually don't believe they are, but they claim to be, started putting out articles because I took a plea deal. And I don't know if they've just watched like too many episodes of Law and Order or whatever, but but seriously, was like, he took a plea deal. That means he's throwing Trump people under the bus. I mean, one of them even wrote.
Yeah, they think article. A plea deal means you're a criminal informant, which has nothing to do with that at all.
Yeah. And one of them wrote like it started. And this is the stuff where I'm like, it's unfortunate, but we as conservatives have to sort of reckon with the fact that there are many people on our side who are, this is this is like Antifa stuff, what they were doing to me. And these are supposedly conservatives doing it. They had no facts. They had no information. They completely made up a story in their own heads. And they started writing articles. And then they started basing articles off each other's articles. And it got to the point where one of them even wrote, this was the headline of the article that he wrote. He wrote, "Did Brandon Straka turn over the entire WALKAWAY donor base to the FBI?"
Wow. That's a massive assumption to make.
Well, and I mean, literally, obviously, with the intention of trying to destroy the WALKAWAY movement. And I'm like, so you're a conservative who's actively trying to destroy the WALKAWAY movement. Like, how are you different than Antifa? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. And
what do you think motivates that? Do you think it's just like jealousy and competition? They're just trying to get you out of the way so they could take your place?
Yes, I think that's a big part of it, but I also think
fucking ew.
Yeah,
that's the part of the right that makes me so angry. It's just like, this idea that it's like the cause doesn't matter unless you get to be the fucking Christ of the movement. Get out of here with that shit. Like, if you have important shit to say and you have value to add to the movement, go build your own WALKAWay and ascend yourself without tearing other people down.
Exactly. And
I feel like I'm talking to the Zuckerberg of like, he's like, if you could have made Facebook, you would have went and made Facebook, you know?
Well, exactly. And it's, again, it's like I just said a second ago, it's the exact same mentality and behavior of the left, only it's on the right, because basically it's the same victim mindset. It's like, I deserve this. I should have this. It's not fair that I don't have it. It's not fair that someone else did it. So therefore I have the right to be destructive and antagonistic and deceitful, and I can spread lies and misinformation, and all of it's justified because I feel bad. I mean, that's basically where that all comes from, rather than, and I really feel like I walk the walk and I'm able to back up what I'm saying right now, because I'm not the biggest fish in the conservative pond, you know, and I'm very much, I'm very competitive minded and I'm very ambitious. I would like to be one of the biggest fish, but I know that for me, that doesn't mean that I go out and find all the biggest fish and kill them and destroy them. It's that I have to work harder and do better. Like I have to keep like improving my game, and I have to keep working hard and working, because I believe I can get there. I believe I can do it, but I'm not going to do it by just creating lies and misinformation about all the people who have a bigger platform than I do, or who are more successful than me. Like I'm not going to get myself there by just being dishonest and deceptive and destructive. Like I'm just going to work my ass off and get as far as I can go.
You know, I resonate with that so much, because there's a lot of times I'll look at other people, and less in the conservative movement, more in comedy, and I look at other people that are doing better than me and I go, what can I learn from them? I never have this feeling inside of me of like, how can I bring them down to raise myself? That thought doesn't ever cross my mind. I'm like, what can I learn from them? And because I truly believe at the end of the day, the superior product always wins. So it's like, what am I? These are the questions I ask myself when I'm not doing as well as I think I am doing. Am I utilizing what I do best? And am I spending enough time doing that? And then am I talking to the right audience? That's the other question that I go, if I'm not talking to the right audience, how do I go find the right audience and start speaking to them? But those are the kind of things that I think really successful people do. And when I say successful, I don't necessarily mean they might not be there yet, but I think over the long stretch of time, people with that mindset get a lot further than the people who like will crab in the bucket their way to outside. Like they'll climb on everyone else and tear everyone else down to get to the top. The problem is when you get to the top, now you have that many people that are gunning for you because you've made enemies on the way. So I just don't know why I've ever, you know, maybe it's because of the one time I read the Bible as a kid where I was just like, man, every time anybody's ever fucked somebody over to get what they wanted, it didn't turn out well for them in the end.
Well, and I also think that another conservative principle that a lot of conservatives who engage in this sort of sabotage and destructive behavior don't obviously, you know, subscribe to or actually mean when they say is the whole thing about, you know, equality of opportunity doesn't always mean equality of outcome.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, life is just not fair sometimes, and that's just the way it is. And here's an example I can give you.
That's the beauty of life, is that it is not fair. And I think that's the beauty of America, is that it's not fair. It rewards the best. It rewards the most interesting. Sometimes it rewards the prettiest.
Here's an example I can give you is I believe that the work that I've done with WALKAWAY, the videos we've produced, the events that we've done, the tenacity at which we've moved forward in the places we've gone into that at times were dangerous, you know, going into Black Lives Matter rallies, Antifa rallies where we got physically assaulted, whatever. I think that the work that my organization and my team have done, in my opinion, is far superior to what just about anybody else in the conservative movement is doing. But then there are people, and here's just one example. Right now, it is very trendy to be black and be a conservative. If you're a black person who's willing to come out and be like, I support Trump, or, I used to be a Democrat, but now I'm a conservative or whatever, you are going to ascend very fast and go much further than somebody who isn't black.
Yeah. And we've seen it. It was pretty much since he was elected. You've seen the meteoric rise of people like Terrence Williams and as a comedian and an influencer. And then you look at, even in the political sphere, people like Kimberly Klacik, who was running in Baltimore, and you see some of these candidates pop up, and it's like they get propped up very quickly. And I don't necessarily even know in some cases that it's sort of fault of their own. I think there is a little bit of what's that?
I said, I'm not faulting them.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying, but I also think there's almost this weird propensity for people on the right to gravitate towards those figures because in a way they sort of represent the lies the left talks about, which is directly what you intended to address with WALKAWAY.
Right. Well, yeah. And so I think that if you're, right now, if you're a black person who's, pro-Trump or espousing conservative values, particularly
Hodge twins as well as another one.
You're going to elevate very quickly. Yeah. On the flip side of it, the conservative movement, I think, is not far enough along yet that they feel the same way about gay people. They don't. And that's the reason why I think, if I were black or a black woman doing the exact same work I was doing, I think I would probably be one of the number one stars of the conservative movement, period. Yeah. But, I think that people look and they're still like, I don't know, the gay guy, like the WALKAWAY thing's great. And look, it's not fair, but it's a reality, and I accept that. And again, I don't look at that and think to myself, well, because the playing field isn't fair, I'm going to just bitch and moan and be a victim. I'm like, no, I still think that I can become one of the biggest fish in the pond if I work hard enough and show everyone, look, gay or not, the work I'm doing is the best. It's amazing, and I'm going to keep at it until I get there. That's just, it's not an even playing field, but it doesn't mean I can't succeed.
Yeah, and you said this in the earlier episode, which I thought was such a great line, and I've already shared it with other people in conversation when you said, I think the ultimate white privilege is never being told the reason for my failures is because of my race or because of something I can change. And so I've always had to take my failures, learn from them, and work at them. And I think that is such a tremendous way to look at it. That's one of the things, and I do think this gives you an edge over I'll throw the names out there, the Candace Owens, the Ben Shapiros, the maybe people that are a little bit more on the mainstream conservative side or the more religious conservative side. But I think what you lend to the movement and to conservatism is something that we share, and that it's a unique perspective and a way of being able to look at the life that I think more represents conservatism than religion or these sort of historical sort of totems of what conservatism is that for me, it's really about a perspective that it's about having that mindset of personal responsibility, personal excellence, personal accountability, and then really just putting your money where your mouth is. And I think as time moves on, and for lack of a better word, the conservative movement becomes more diverse, it'll get to a point where that isn't enough anymore, and that the substance of what people are talking about will matter more. And that's when I think someone like you will break through the noise, because beyond being the gay conservative movement guy, you have such a great perspective on what conservatism is and what it all in a way has always been about and where it needs to continue to go.
Thank you. And, I think part of that unique perspective for me, and some people love it and some people hate it, but is, I don't have, it's probably that little kind of remaining part of my former liberal self. Like, I'm very much against bringing your religious beliefs into your political I do not believe our government should be getting involved in legislating morality or anything like that. There are certain there's certain moral issues that you don't even need to involve religion. We shouldn't be killing people. And, even the issue of abortion does not have to be a religious issue whatsoever. The issue of marriage doesn't have to be a religious issue whatsoever. I mean,
to me, abortion is very simple. If you look at it just from a legal perspective, it's the only circumstance in which we allow an individual to end the life of another individual legally. And that is not consistent with the law. And so even if you just took a look at it from that perspective and said, we have this inconsistency in the law that we need to address, you could address it and make the way we deal with that consistent without ever addressing the morality of it or the religious nature of it.
I just don't think that conservative values are only for certain types of people. And I think that there are a lot of people in positions.
So well said.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people in positions who have a loud voice or a big platform or positions of power who are kind of treating it that way. And I think that's one key thing that I do differently. I mean, we're about to do a WALKAWAY event in a few weeks, and one of my panelists is going to be a porn star. And like I know that there are other organizations that have actually kicked porn stars out of their events, and I'm putting one on my stage.
Yeah.
Because I don't think. What do I care if a person makes porn for a living? What do I care? I mean, that has nothing to do with, secure borders and small government and less taxes. And what do I care what the person does?
Yeah, we have the exact same perspective. And while I can sit at a table and agree with Ben Shapiro that the loss of faith and purpose in the American people is what has contributed to our state of affairs in general, I don't believe that religion is the only solution to that. I think you can find your sense of purpose and belonging in a lot of things: community, friendship, family, your work. Like my sense of purpose comes from my work and what I try to do as a comedian, but that is kind of the divergence there, is that there is sort of this growing sentiment on the right that, well, it's the loss of our relationship with God and the church that has led to this purposelessness. And while I do believe that really happened and that's a real factor, I don't believe that church is the only cure for it. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100% it makes sense. And I can look back at the history of my own life, and I certainly have known atheists who were much kinder and more compassionate people than devout Christians that I've known, who were nasty, nasty people and very, I think, destructive to people around them. So, and, I remember, especially at times when gay rights issues were a major wedge issue in the forefront, and people would talk about, society's falling apart because of the lack of God, and we need the 10 commandments and we need this and that. And it's like, well, maybe, but I mean, I know a lot of religious people who are not very Christ-like. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, I know a lot of atheistic people who seem to adhere to with the principles of what I would consider to be Christ-like, and they don't believe in that at all. I think in a lot of ways, theology is the enemy of action. And I think the right and the left both have a problem with being so in love with their theology that they ignore the actions of their members. And that's really what America needs to get back to, is rewarding behaviors and not ideas. And that's really, when you talk about like, what is the issue versus what is the symptom? The symptom is a distancing from God and religion, but the issue is a lack of taking the proper actions and responsibility for the right actions and people living the right way. And so you can fix the symptom by sending everybody back to church, but that's not the disease. The disease is that we don't reward the right behaviors in our society. And some of that is cultural. Some of that has to do with religion, and you can change the value system. But at the end of the day, rewarding the right behaviors when people behave in a way that is admirable is how we fix America, regardless of whether that's in a religious way or a spiritual way or an atheistic way. And that's something I agree with when people talk about like culture in the Black community. It's like, well, what is valued or what is like put on a pedestal is shit that's undesirable, right? Like killing, murder, drugs, all of those types of things. If that's what is considered cool, then that's not going to steer people that follow that culture, or that sort of like hip hop culture or whatever, or you could call it like gangster culture, because I think Italian people have that with the mafia a little romanticism there as well. So there's all these areas in society and culture where you can look at and go, well, that's not necessarily the example that people should follow. But at the end of the day, the example should be based on good behavior and people who are kind and nice and do the right things versus people who just fucking say the right things and don't actually do anything. Can we talk for a second about my handle on my name?
Yeah, sure.
Can you?
Yeah. What about it?
Do you see it?
Yeah. Oh, bro, no, that is completely wrong. How did that happen?
I don't know. I just saw it though.
That's hilarious.
Like it's like you misgendered me or something.
Branda. Is that better? There we go.
Yeah,
Branda. I was rebranding you.
You were.
Yeah, no, my bad. I complete typo on my end. I'll go ahead and paste it over the frames. But yeah, so I think I agree with you on that. Is that it would be very easy. I think this is my concern that I have with sort of the religious right is that if like everyone went back to church, they would go, our work here is done, and it's like maybe not at all. Right. You know what I mean? Like maybe not at all. You just got people to believe what you want them to believe, but that doesn't fix these problems.
I don't see that much on the right though anymore. And that's something that I wish a lot of people on the left saw and understood is that, I think that the world has really changed. I think the right has really changed. I've met thousands, probably tens of thousands of conservatives at all the events I've done the last few years around the country. Some of them are very, very, very religious and devout. And some of them, like, it took me a while to get used to people praying over me. That's always, I don't know if anyone's ever prayed over you before.
No.
But it's happened to me many times, and it usually starts with one.
I think I would rather them all jerk off on me than pray over me. I think I would be more comfortable getting cummed on. Is it came on or cummed on? I would much rather bathe in a group of people's ejaculate than have them pray over me.
Yeah, no, it usually starts with like one woman coming up to you and saying, I love you. You mean so much to me. Can I please pray over you? I want you to be safe. And I at this point, I know where it's headed, like, because it creates a domino effect. But of course, you can't tell somebody no. You can't say no, like, please don't pray over me.
Yeah.
So
I'm always afraid they're going to take the prayer in a direction I don't agree with. Like, well, they pray over me, like, please watch over him, protect over him. And if you could make him eat better and exercise more and get rid of some of this fat, I'd be like, I didn't agree to that. Can we strike that from the record, whoever's listening?
Well, that's the thing, is that you have to remember that it's really more about them than it is about you, So it's like you're kind of just the vessel for them to be able to express something that's inside of themselves that they want to say. So it starts with one person asking, and then of course you say yes. And they put their hand on top of you, and then other people see that happening, and it's like moths to a flame. So, and I've been in situations before where I've had literally like 100 or 200 people all around with the hand in, and then you have people speaking in tongues, and you have people, like, there's a lot going on, and sometimes it can go on for several minutes, and you're kind of like, wow. Oh my God, it gets a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I've gotten to the point where I really, I appreciate it, I guess, for what it is, because it's people who love you and they care about you, and this is how they express that love and care. And again, I've come to realize that it's not even so much about me necessarily, but it's about something that they want to express. And I don't know, you kind of just have to find the blessing, I guess, in being that for somebody else, that they want to express that because of you, that you've inspired them to express that. And
I think that's a nice way to think about it.
Yeah. And not worry about what they're actually saying or doing, because, yes, I mean, it's about their own belief. I mean, some people take it really far. I mean, I haven't ever had anyone to be like, please make him straight, or like.
That was going to be my question. Is anyone been like, please, Lord, protect over Brandon, and if you could help him find a nice girl, that would be lovely.
No, that's never happened. But, definitely people kind of assert their own desires, like, protect him on his path, and please, dear Lord, send him this place on this mission, and, make sure that anyone gets in his way, falls away. And, they're like kind of building a whole movie around it. Yeah. And I'm like,
you're like, okay, don't you put that on me, Ricky Bobby. Right. I hope you have sons, glorious sons, and that their legs are taken away from them. Remember that scene from Talladega Nights? That would be my concern about people praying on my behalf. I'm like, well, can I look it over before you send it in? I just want to prove. Can you CC me before you press the send button? Is that doable?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, we've gotten a lot of stuff. I mean, so what's next? Tell people kind of what's next. Obviously, you're strapped to the home office for a little bit.
Well, we have that really cool event coming up on Monday, and then over the next like 5 weeks or so, 5-6 weeks, we're going to be doing WALKAWAY virtual events utilizing Twitter Spaces and other kind of online mediums.
Spaces.
I do too. And I think it's really effective. It's a great way to find people on the left who probably wouldn't listen to you otherwise, just because people are curious. And so we're going to do this event on Monday.
Twitter. A lot of people ask me, like, why don't you just abandon these mainstream platforms because they censor and they don't like people? And I just go, no, because you have the opportunity to get everybody when you're in these major systems. And if I can, make a good point to somebody who's never heard it before, I think that's valuable than just going into an echo chamber.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And so over the next 5 weeks, we're doing a Hispanic event. We're going to do an actual scheduled LGBT event, which is different than the one we're doing on Monday. We're going to do an event with comedians that you and I have already talked about. Mm-hmm. And then we also want to kind of get moms together because there have been some really interesting things that have happened over the last year with school boards and parents fighting the PTA. And, it's unleashed a lot of those grizzly mama bears. And so we want to kind of actually get left moms versus right moms and basically have a mom cage match. So that should be kind of fun. Everyone likes to see moms, go at each other. And and then once I'm off of house arrest, which is April 28th, then I'm just going to get back out on the road and we're going to start creating videos and doing live events and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, we're working on something. We're looking at the end of May, like Memorial Day weekend, or maybe a week before after that. We're working on something this summer. Maybe we can get you involved in. I'll tell you about that offline. But
cool.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking to do too, is get out more and just be amongst the people. This last couple of years, I do think that was kind of funny when you were like, they. But when I got sentenced, it was house arrest. And I was like, oh, so do you get credit for time served during the pandemic? You would have thought hey, can I count the time served when the government shut everything down unlawfully in the first place?
Yeah. And it kind of blows because when everything shut down, I still was kind of out working because I took it up to start kind of traveling around the country and doing these Reopen America rallies. Yeah. And because I just wasn't, I'm we don't have to do this. We don't have to just stay home all day because the government tells us to. And so I was traveling around, I was working, I was doing outdoor events. And so I kind of didn't really do the quarantine thing. And then now it's they found a way to get me.
Yeah. They quarantine you anyway. Yeah.
God. They got me in the end, so you can't beat the government.
Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. Well, good, man. Well, thank you so much for jumping on and doing the two-parter. I know, like I said, I didn't want to rush the first one, but I know you got a lot of stuff going on from the Professor Claw Cave. Yep. That's how I'm going to refer to it from now on. I just picture you with your back to the camera stroking a cat. Yes, get me the gaze on a Twitter Spaces. See, look, you're already stumbling all over the place. Did the cat jump up? Is that what happened?
No, I was going to give you a really dramatic turn, and then I just almost knocked my entire desk over. So
oh, there you go. Well, you can't just become an evil villain overnight. You got to practice it. You got to work on the chair turns. You got to watch the original 3 Austin Powers movies. Then you'll get it.
I should go back and revisit those.
I look forward to gray jumpsuit Dr. Evil Brandon Straka.
It's coming. It's coming.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Well, thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah, if you ever need a fat bastard in your regime, I'm happy to sign up.
We do. Always have a need for a fat bastard.
You got it, man. So Brandon Straka is the website. I spelled it right on this one. Look at that.
BrandonStraka.com.
Yeah, so people can go there, contribute to your legal fund as well, because I can't imagine that was inexpensive to defend.
No.
And then and keep tabs on what you've got coming up event wise. And like you said, end of April, you'll be back on the trail and doing all kinds of stuff. You got any, before we let you go, do you have any big predictions for the midterms and the next election cycle? Do you really think that that we're looking at a moment of change in America?
I do think we're looking at a moment of change, but I don't think it's going to be this sweeping victory that the Republicans think it is. Mm-hmm. And I also don't think it's at all going to be a reflection of people feeling positively about Republicans. I think it's going to be a complete and total Democrat backlash. And then I think that Republicans are going to be like, yeah, fuck yeah, we're awesome. And it's going to be like, no, you're awful. They just hate you a little bit less.
Yeah, I agree with you. The concern I have about where it's headed is it reminds me very much of where the Democrats were going before, where it was like you can't, like during the Trump administration, everything was a referendum on Trump and they didn't really have their own platform. And I worry that the conservatives are doing the same thing where everything that they're running on is look how shitty it is. And it's like, what are your plans to fix it? Like, and by the way, like, we can't now go through this thing where every 4 years the teams take turns ruining the country.
Right.
I feel like everybody is in a position now where we want like some radical change. I want to change the way Congress works. I want to change the way bills are passed. Like we're at the point where, as much as I love the Constitution, I think we need to go in and start making some changes that protect the rights of citizens, starting with things like 230 that allows these internet companies to sort of run things in this pick and choose way of going, no, you're a platform. No, you're a publisher. And so we're going to deplatform you. And then we're going to give this person a voice. I mean, we've got to actually get some shit done and start demanding that of our elected officials. Because quite frankly, I think you could go back 20 years and go, what was the thing that changed society for the better? And you'd have a real hard time finding a piece of government legislation that did that. Other than maybe the universal marriage equality piece, which essentially was fixing something that, to your point, the government should have never been involved in the first place.
Well, yeah, that's not exactly what I said. But
in terms of having a say in marriage and all those types of things, right?
Right. No, I was just saying that I don't think that it should have been like, I think that there's a clear line between religious marriage and civil marriage.
Oh,
and
sure. Yeah.
And I don't understand why religion even has to be brought into it when we're talking about the civic part of it. I mean, it's a civil contract with the government, and it's a religious contract with your church, and the two things I think don't need to come together.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of my the religious aspect of the morality of it shouldn't have never been part of government's decision making in the first place. Is that more?
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
Yeah, that it should have never been a question of like what is morally right and what is morally wrong. It's like no, it's you're prohibiting civil contracts between two individuals in a situation where that shouldn't be prohibited between any two individuals. I would think if a guy wants to marry a fucking alligator, he should be allowed to. Good luck getting that alligator to pay taxes because they're very, very stingy creatures. Brandon Straka, thank you.
Yes, friend. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.